Generally, you said feminism is
here's what actually happened.
The foundation of all knowledge.
I'm really mad that
what difference does it make, right? What
Stop.
the deregulation of the industry is obviously going to cause more of that industry.
And to lubricate the trust connection between people until they have enough.
Yet we could still look at biological reality in determining who's a female, even if there are.
Why don't you denounce feminism the same way you're denouncing capitalism? If you don't...
For something to be objective, it needs to be verifiable. And you can't verify...
If I make a claim as a political pundit, it is true that I definitely could be wrong.
Yeah,
you're promoting, right?
Ideologies that make them the politics, right? This is my ideology.
Yeah, but...
So, 2015, anyone go back and watch the footage? The first GOP debate.
Cool. Okay. Oh, that? We're the Trey Bar, you said.
Let's go.
I'm saying it doesn't. Hot diggity dog. I really like that new intro. A couple more tweaks on it, and I will be super, super excited for it. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I am Sara, the Raging Tomato, bringing to you another Moderator Monday on a Sunday evening. This evening, I have Wi-Fi Gospel and Mark Reid debating the question, secular humanism versus Christian ethics, which is better for society? I love this topic. We really get into the deep dives of moralities and ethics and all those things, and it gets me all excited. Alex, would you like to start with your opening statement, please?
Absolutely. Thank you, Sara. Thank you, Mark, for being here. So we only have 8 minutes for an opening statement. I just want to try to accomplish two things with my opening. First thing I want to do tonight is to show exactly why secular humanist ethics, specifically as described in the Humanist Manifesto 3, is not only inferior to Christian ethics, but it really can't even get on the court to play ball. No one can definitively tell me exactly what secular humanist ethics are. The Humanist Manifesto provides no actual ethical prescriptions. It reads more like a TED Talk than a moral framework. The authors openly state, quote, values and ideals are subject to change as our knowledge and understanding advances. Also, the life stance of humanism is guided by reason, inspired by compassion, and informed by experience. That means that the manifesto does not define right and wrong. It just affirms that people will decide right and wrong over time, and that those decisions will change. So what are we left with? A set of feel-good aspirations without any binding moral oughts. This means you can have two secular humanists, both appealing to the same document, come to opposite conclusions. One says euthanasia is compassionate and therefore ethical. The other says it's cruel and devalues life. Both are inspired by compassion, both appeal to human experience, and there's nothing in the manifesto to say who's right. You can justify almost anything with compassion and experience: abortion, prostitution, even eugenics, depending on how you frame the outcomes. Good night, buddy. I love you. Christian ethics.
It's okay.
I only had a bet doing Jeff in your whole entire life. Thank you. You too, buddy. Love you.
Maybe stop the time for this. I don't think this is part of the argument.
Yeah. It's okay, Alex. Don't worry.
Sorry, one sec.
It's okay. I've been there. Don't worry.
All right, I'm ready. Thank you for stopping the time.
I love the interruption. Don't worry. Go ahead.
Cool. Thanks. You can justify almost anything with compassion and Christian ethics doesn't give us a vague cloud of values. It gives us commandments grounded in the unchanging nature of a holy God. That's moral clarity. The Humanist Manifesto gives you a compass with no north. And you may be tempted to say, well, what about when two Christians have different interpretations of Christian ethics? In this case, we need a normative authority to interpret the scripture. However, it's a completely different issue than the one secular humanism has. In this case of the Christian, there is a prescription, and there is a correct and incorrect interpretation of that prescription. In the case of secular humanism, there is no prescription. And so what is compassionate to one is cruel to another. Christian ethics tells us exactly what it means to be compassionate or to love your neighbor. The Humanist Manifesto doesn't tell you what to do. It tells you to figure it out and then change your mind later. The first question for my opponent tonight is this. Can you use the Humanist Manifesto to denounce the following prescriptions that are based off the manifesto itself? Here's one. In every society, there exist demographic groups, whether defined by class, geography, or cognitive ability, that statistically contribute more to societal costs, crime, healthcare burdens, economic dependency, than they contribute in productivity or innovation to society. If data showed that sterilizing or even eliminating such populations would lead to a net increase in prosperity, happiness, and health for the rest of society, what principle in secular humanism, as articulated in the manifesto, would forbid such an action? If ethics are fluid and human welfare is the guiding measure, then isn't the logic of such utilitarian math inescapable? Wouldn't eliminating burdensome groups for the greater good be not only permissible, but morally commendable under a consequentialist humanist ethic? What in the Humanist Manifesto ultimately prevents such atrocities when they appear to work? Secondly, if hypothetically, Donald Trump and his political allies were to enact policies that essentially enslaved everyone except themselves, but raised the standard of living for every American, making households wealthier, healthier, and happier, and if these outcomes were verifiably positive by the standards of societal well-being and self-reported happiness, then on what basis, under Humanist Manifesto 3, could one objectively say it would be wrong for him to enact those policies? If societal values evolved such that benevolent authoritarianism, or even slavery, was viewed as beneficial for human flourishing, happiness, and health. Good night, buddy.
Good night, Dad.
Good night. All right, I'm live, okay, guys?
Okay.
Good night. Thank you. All right, good night. I love you. Buddy. All right, I promise that's the last one. I got 3 of them.
Okay. That's okay. That's okay. Don't sweat it. They're always the priority. No worries.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. All right. If societal values evolved such that benevolent authoritarianism or even slavery was viewed as beneficial for human flourishing, happiness, and health, what could secular humanism appeal to in order to say it's wrong? In other words, if the results are maximally positive and the values guiding ethics are changeable and pragmatic, then why couldn't mass enslavement be justified so long as it works? A worldview that says morality changes with consensus or outcomes cannot meaningfully condemn tyranny. It cannot meaningfully condemn tyranny, only inefficiency. Now let's get into the positive case for Christian ethics. When we look at the data across key areas, morality, family, charity, mental health, civic life, and political stability, Christianity consistently produces better results than secularism. Christianity gives society a stable, transcendent foundation for human duties and ethics, rooted in the nature of a just and loving God. Secular morality, by contrast, shifts with culture, public opinion, or government authority. If society defines right and wrong by consensus, then things like eugenics or grape are only wrong if enough people say so. Christianity says they're wrong always because morality comes from God, not man. A society that can't replace itself will collapse. Secular countries like Japan, South Korea, Germany, and Canada have fertility rates well below 1.5, well under the 2.1 replacement level. By contrast, church-going Christians average 2.4 to 2.6 children per woman, even in Western nations. Religious populations grow, secular ones shrink. And there's a study by the Pew Research that shows that religious people and secular people, when they're in more religious countries, they actually have more children. Christians consistently give more and help more. A meta-analysis of 77 studies found religious people were significantly more likely to donate time and money, even to secular causes. In the US, weekly churchgoers give 3.5 times more to charity than the non-religious. They're also more likely to volunteer, even for non-religious organizations. Christianity commands love of neighbor, care for the poor, and self-sacrifice, not just empathy, but action. Religious belief, especially Christianity, protects mental health. A Swiss study of 3.7 million people found those with no religion were more than twice as likely to unalive themselves than Christians. Multiple meta-analysis confirm that religious people experience lower depression, less anxiety, and greater life satisfaction. Across every category, moral grounding, family sustainability, generosity, mental health, and peace, Christianity outperforms secularism. The data is clear. Christianity makes societies thrive. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. And Mark, I believe you wanted to share screen, so feel free to pop it up on backstage when you need to.
I did, yes. Just 1 second. Sorry, I probably should have done that while Alex was talking. Just one
That's
second.
okay.
There we go.
Oops. There we go.
Okay, just tell me when you've got everything up and I will begin.
Yep, you're up and running. All set.
Fantastic. Hello, my name's Mark Reid, and I'll be taking the secular humanist side of the debate today. I want to thank Sarah for moderating. I want to thank Alex for being here and you for giving me your time and listening to my side of the debate on opposition to the Christian side. Now, I guess the first thing is secular humanism has been vastly misunderstood and perhaps vastly misrepresented by a lot of people in the debate community. I want to clear that up and make sure they understand what secular humanism is and why it will not persecute or destroy religions and why so many institutions around the world are in support of it. So secular humanism, are my slides going? I hope so.
I only see just the main, it looks like the title page.
Sorry, give me 1 second. I just have to figure out why this isn't working. That one? Yeah, that's better. Yep. Okay, so secular humanism has been called a religion. I think this is inaccurate. It's a philosophy and a moral system, but there's no real identifiable focus of worship or veneration, so it would not be correct to call it a religion. Now, it is true that there is theistic humanism as well, with the goal of secular human and theistic humanism, or believing in a god and humanism, are quite similar, only they're motivated by different reasons. So it's important to note that the main attribute of secular humanism is the humanism part, not the secular part. So what's humanism all about? It's about human well-being. That's basically it. Now, human well-being can cover a lot. There's physical well-being, psychological well-being, societal well-being. Now, it is important to a secular humanist to understand the balance between all of them. You can't have well people in an unwell society, and you can't have a well society without well people in it. I'll go more into this balance, but for now, just understand that there is one thing central pillar of this debate. If you are not talking about human well-being, then you are not talking about secular humanism. And I really want to underscore this. So if you're talking about harming people or hurting people, if you're talking about things that would cause suffering, then you are not talking about something that would be endorsed by secular humanism. Okay? With that said, secular humanism uses utilitarianism, with the utility being human well-being. This is a complex consequentialist system which seeks to evaluate whether any act could reasonably lead to human well-being or lead to human suffering. This provides a framework to evaluate actions in the virtue of how it serves the well-being of people and the society. Do note that one of the goals of secular humanism is the well-being of society. What gets to a healthy, content society without causing suffering in people. A lot of this is based upon the pro-social guides provided by our natural emotions of empathy and reciprocity. Empathy tells us how others feel. Reciprocity gives us an idea of when actions will cause antisocial behaviors. So what do secular humanists want? Secular humanists believe people should have the freedom to be able to seek development and contentment in life. If that does not harm or oppress others in doing so, we seek to abolish religion or destroy religious belief if that religion is helping people instead of harming them. Sorry, we do not seek to abolish religion if that religion is helping people rather than harming them. No religion should have authority in society that will lead to religious wars, strife, and fighting, causing harm to societies and members of that society. All religions are given equal rights, just as all humans retain equal rights. We believe anyone's religious belief does not give them the authority to oppress anyone else, just as someone else's religious belief give them the authority to oppress yours. So how do we tell if something is doing harm? Well, this is where science steps in. Science for the last 100 years has been the best methodology for discovering what is fact and what is fiction. We know science is capable of this, as it had produced the most accurate representation of the world around us that we can use to do everything from make planes fly to allow people on the other side of the earth to communicate. Now, you may think that a God created science and we cannot agree on that. However, everyone uses the products of science in their lives daily. So I hope we can agree on its effectiveness and consistency. Now, science doesn't tell us how to use it or which is the right or wrong way to use it, and that's where we need morality like what secular humanism provides. So we're essentially using this to show the necessity for psychological needs addressed and met, and we have more room for the psychological and physical needs. A person with no food or water will not be concerned with psychological needs. They need to take care of that first. So we have sort of an overlapping hierarchy of what's important to people. Now, the ones down in the physiology are going to be your rights, your right to bodily autonomy, your right to safety and security, things like this. And we can determine these rights from what people need to be well, as opposed to what adds to their well-being. So we can generate rights from needs versus wants in society, and psychologists do this all the time. We can also evaluate well-being with sociology, making statistical analysis and given a large enough sample size, accurately model happiness on a country or even global scale. Do note that greatest happiness in the greatest happiness principle, where we try to maximize this, doesn't mean that fleeting joy that comes by. It just means satisfaction, life satisfaction. So this is sort of why secular humanism is so much better than things like Christianity, because it actually will use these metrics to measure it instead of just asserting you have to be happy under its regime. Okay, so Christianity, first off, it has the authority problem. It basically claims ultimate authority without demonstration or consideration. In secular humanism, the authority lies in humans, people, in the formation of a social contract, mutual respect. Christianity does not do that. It always seeks to impose itself through assertions of authority. Of course, not all Christian denominations are like this. However, generally, religion will lead to intolerance, persecutions, oppression, and violence. And there is a lot of evidence to support this. We have the Crusades. Some of the Crusades were defensive, but not all of them. There was a doctrine, bellum sacrum, or holy war, that gave them leeway to attack anybody that was not Christian. They also ended up destroying a large number of Jewish communities along the Rhine in doing this. They were put to the sword or had their impurities literally burnt away. Nice stuff, real moral. The Inquisitions, no one ever expects the Spanish Inquisition. They didn't just perpetrate this against other religions, they also did it against Christians that seemed to be a threat to the social order. Torture, killing, brutalization. They thought they were doing the work of the Lord under this assertion of authority. The Spanish conquest. So this is due to the doctrine of discovery. It was a doctrine perpetrated by the Roman Catholic Church that basically told people that if somebody wasn't Christian in a land, nobody occupied that land and they had a right to go in and seize it by force. Lovely Christian morals right there. There's a denomination problem. That's the second one. Though Christians cannot agree on which denomination is right, and if they're left to their own devices, they will inevitably end up fighting among themselves. This is why secular humanism is needed, because when Christians are given authority over others, the other denominations will not accept it, and the Christian denomination that has all the power will persecute all of the other ones. The only solution is to make the denominations equal and give them the same rights and benefits as all the other denominations. In this way, there is no problem of differing divine authority in the question of who is the true Christian or who is the right Christian. And we have some examples of that. The Chalcedonian Schism. This was when the papal attacked the Eastern church and basically led to an incredible amount of persecution. The Albigensian Crusade, that was a crusade against the Cathars, who were actually a non-Trinitarian Catholic group. The Roman Catholic Church slaughtered all of the Cathars. It's basically one of the first genocides of the second millennium, and it was carried out by Christians in the service of God who were, destroying the heretics. The Great Schism, that was, of course, the Catholic Church against the Protestants. It led to, that's the Eastern Orthodox schism. So all of these are not just Christians persecuting other religions, but Christians persecuting Christians. So I really want to talk about why humans have to cooperate and exercise pro-social behavior. The more we learn about where we are, the more obvious it seems that we're in a precarious position. Now, you may or may not agree, but secular humanists do not believe that any supernatural being is coming to save us. No God is going to take us to anything better. Secular humanists believe it's up to humans and humans alone to ensure our survival on this planet, or to stupidly cause our species to go extinct. We do not know what it will take to nurture humanity on this incredibly important journey, but it is possible we may very well need every single one of us working together for the benefit of all in order to survive. The simple fact is that secular humanism seeks to have a flourishing, happy societies where all people are treated well, while Christianity wants to force society to its benefit, to its particular dogma, while marginalizing, persecuting, and even exterminating those that do not believe. That should tell you everything you need to know about which is better for society in general. Thank you.
Perfect. Lovely. Thank you so much, Mark. And for all of the viewers, don't forget, we're going to get through this debate with the open dialogue. Then we will do closing statements. We will read and respond to your kind super chats that come in. And then, of course, per usual, we will go into open panel dumpster fire. So if you do have something to add to this conversation, hang tight. And towards the end, we will drop the link, and you're welcome to come on stage and bite back, I guess. Gentlemen, I leave the floor open to you.
Awesome. I have a couple.
Sure.
Thank you. So basically, I asked a question about prescriptions. Do you deny the Humanist Manifesto, or do you agree with it?
No, I agree with it. Sure.
Cool. So I just have a couple questions then, based on the scenarios I gave, the two scenarios. The first one, yeah. So I'm sure we both agree that society should be safer, healthier, and more prosperous, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we use data. Okay.
Well, you brought up like what would stop humanists, like what in the Humanist Manifesto would stop this. In the Humanist Manifesto, it talks a lot about the dignity of people and freedom, basically liberty in order to enjoy our lives. So I don't know like what you understand about the Humanist Manifesto, but I don't see how you could enslave people or do any of the things that you're talking about and still have dignity and freedom to live your life.
Well, basically, you said it's based on utilitarianism. So if So if the util was that society was thriving, that everybody was thriving, then their freedoms, we could stomp on a little bit of freedom for that, right?
What's the utility?
So let's see here. If we could imagine that data showed that a certain group, based on region, income, or intelligence,
I asked a question.
Oh wait, I thought you were saying
Do you
what
know
the
what the
utility
utility is? Yeah.
in utilitarianism.
Well, utilitarianism doesn't tell you what utility they're using. It's just that they
Right.
prioritize a utility. So I'm asking if you know what utility secular humanists are prioritizing.
The overall well-being of human society.
No.
What would it be then?
It would be human well-being. So yeah, you could chain up people and basically, do all of this stuff to make the society flourish, but people would not be well. And as I put it in my introduction, there's got to be a balance between people being having their well-being seen to, and people, the society having its well-being. So basically what I put across was that we have a hierarchy, and this was all in my introduction, of these certain rights we can give people based upon what people need to be well, right? So you've got a hierarchy of things like physiological needs, like food, water, shelter, things like that, physical needs. You've got psychological needs, which are things like love, belonging, and this is all understood very well in psychology and sort of neurology. It's not unknown. You have higher things such as at the very top you've got sort of development, right? Like being able to be fulfilled, like having some kind of goal and being the best person you can be. Self-actualization is what it's called. So we can sort of say, hey, these are the basic rights that we need to be well because we know what they are. And then we can say, hey, as long as you're doing no harm, then you can go for other things. But this whole thing about, well, if you enslave people, you will have well humans. I don't think that's the case.
Okay, but
I think they'll be very unwell.
If all of those metrics are met, and the only thing is that you're enslaved, such as, I have an example here. That you can't pick your job, you can't pick where you live, stuff like that, where your freedoms are highly limited. But all of those other metrics are met. You have high life satisfaction, you're wealthy, you're prosperous, everybody's happy, you get 4 days off a week. Like, all of this stuff is great, except you have very limited freedom in what you can do with your hobbies and your work. Wouldn't that be under secular humanism?
No.
Why not?
Because we need, when you take into account self-actualization, it isn't necessarily you're trying to equate what we call happiness, or the maximal happiness, with pleasure, and that's not the same thing. It's not your temporary joy. It's not your in the future, like you just getting some kind of enjoyment from something. What we're talking about with the greatest happiness principle is your overall life satisfaction, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean days off, as you put it. Like that's incidental. Each person can choose for themselves what they think is their self-fulfillment. As long as they're not harming others, then that is the way that we go. That is the way that we maximize happiness.
So
and by happiness, I don't mean temporary short-term enjoyment of something. I mean life satisfaction by that.
Right. And how do you measure life satisfaction?
With science, as I put it in my thing, we can measure that using a variety of tools to say, hey, we can measure sort of. It's interesting because one of the things you sort of said was that Christians give more to charity and things like that, and that's an interesting study, which I think is a bit misleading because Christians give a lot more to their churches as well, and that sort of skews the study. But it is true that they give more. But another study says that Christians only give more to other Christians. It's in fact atheists who will give charity and do things for people without knowing or caring whether they're Christian, Muslim, Hindi. They will give more to what's called their out group more than Christians.
So I just want to get back to the life satisfaction thing, so that's a different point.
Sure.
So if I tell you that I'm satisfied with my life, you wouldn't believe me?
What do you mean?
So everything, my job, whatever I pursue in my life satisfies me.
Why wouldn't I believe you?
All right. So it's a self-report. So if everybody self-reports that they are highly satisfied with their life in this scenario that I gave to you, why would that go against secular humanism?
If everybody reports that they're satisfied with their life, would they be satisfied with their life?
Seems like it.
So if you couldn't go and see your friends, if you were restricted in what you worked, if you were restricted in such a way, you would be satisfied with that?
In this scenario, it's a hypothetical.
In this scenario. So in this scenario where you've changed the entire idea of what human nature is and how humans behave, you basically are saying, well, if you're satisfied, why couldn't it be that way under secular humanism?
In this hypothetical, if these people are satisfied without having the freedom to do certain things that we have the freedom to today, but report life satisfaction, then would it be against secular humanism?
Yeah.
How?
Because we understand what makes life satisfaction. And you could say, hey, I'm satisfied under that. But somebody would go, well, would you be more satisfied if you also had these freedoms to go wherever you want and do whatever you want to do? And they probably would be, wouldn't they?
Well, if the data showed, again, this is a hypothetical. So if the data shows that people have more life satisfaction under this benevolent authoritarianism regime, then that would be the more secular humanist regime, right?
So you're basically saying that if you make data up, because we know that people are not more satisfied under... No. You're saying if they were, right? The thing is that we know from studying dictatorships that people are not more satisfied under them. So you're basically saying if reality somehow changes, that people become more satisfied being oppressed. I mean, in this magical world somewhere, that reality changes and people are suddenly happy at being oppressed and have violence used against them and you know, all of this stuff, then yeah, maybe that would be acceptable, but we don't live in that reality, Alex. So, you know, well, I want to ask you a question. I want to ask you a question. If your God commands you, or you believe that your God commands you, that those people should be oppressed and in that situation and enslaved, isn't that the moral thing to do?
In a world where God would be that way, yes.
What wouldn't that be this world?
No.
Well, what's the rules for slavery in the Bible then? Exodus 21.
So we can definitely go down that, right? So what does it say?
Okay, well, let's go down that route.
What's the verse say?
Look, if you're talking about the manifesto not having, you know, sort of clear rules that you're not allowed to enslave people, let's talk about the Bible having clear rules.
Well, it's just a two-quote, but I'm willing to go down.
Well, let me finish. Having clear rules about literally how much you're supposed to beat your slave. If they don't die in a couple of days, then you're not punished at all for beating your slave. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong.
Well, in the same way that if a prisoner in our prison systems, I'm not exactly sure how that works in Australia. I'm guessing it's similar to the US. If they disobey the prison guards, they get beat into submission, correct?
It doesn't say anything about disobeying.
Why would they get beat then?
Well, because if the master beats their slave and he doesn't die in a couple of days, then they are not to be punished for beating their slave.
Well, there are other prescriptions as well, such as if you harm them, like if you damage their eye, for example, they get to go free. There's also other prescriptions that say if your master is not treating you well, you can flee, and the Hebrew next to you has to take you in because of your master beating you.
No,
we can go to those verses. Yeah, that's literally in there. We can go to them.
Well, what amazes me with
let me finish. Now.
Okay.
You're saying that in the Bible we have this: you can beat your slave, you can own slaves and beat them. So that's the same exact thing you can do under secular humanism. There's nothing in the manifesto that says that you can't do that.
Well, yeah, it says to respect the dignity and the freedom of people. So I don't see
unless they're a prisoner.
Excuse me, do you not understand that, like, when the manifesto says, hey, we uphold the dignity of humanity and the freedom of people to live free, that is in direct contradiction to slavery, while at the same time you're saying, well, it's got rules for beating your slave, but feasibly that could happen under secular humanism. when secular humanism's pronouncements are just in opposite to what you're saying.
So is secular humanism completely opposed to prisons?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So what do we do with criminals then, Mark?
Rehabilitative.
And how do we rehabilitate them?
Do you mean prisons as in the style you're talking about, where people are beaten all the time?
No, American prisons.
American prison. What? So
yeah.
You think that a privately run prison that makes money from sheltering people and working them on, almost criminally low wages is a moral thing to do?
So now here's the thing. In a prison system,
no, answer the question.
I am answering the question. In that specific prison system, I'm not saying everything that's done there is moral, but you said working them at extremely low wages. How do you think a prison system can afford to open? They either have to take money from other people via taxes, or they have to have the criminals work. Now, I don't know about you, but if you commit a crime and are duly processed and you're a negative effect on society, I want you to work in a prison system, till your own land, get your own food, make your own clothes. Yes, I don't want to pay for that after you have a negative onset of society. Now, is it always a perfect way? Can we always do that? No, that's why we pay taxes, to have these systems in place.
Oh, how very moral of you. Okay, so the way I basically see it,
you don't think criminals should work for their own food?
Excuse me, I'm actually in the middle of talking.
Well,
Alex.
you've
had your say. You've had your say. Stop.
Yeah, but you just
stop.
You
said
Alex, how moral
Alex,
of you. I needed
let's
Alex.
get through the let's let Mark get through the point, and then Alex, you can most certainly get back to where you left off after that if you want.
So under secular humanism, opposed to this Christian doctrine of authoritarianism, basically we would just say, hey, what we're after is human well-being. And we know through studies and science and the examples of other countries that rehabilitative prisons that are run in order to stop and give people a chance not to be criminals anymore are way more effective than the punitive idea, the punishment systems of the US that also use private prisons. So they have no compulsion to rehabilitate people because they make money from people going back into the system. What secular humanists do is they look at what provides the well-being for humans, including criminals, not let's make them, suffer, because that leads to reoffending and the recidivism rates that we see in the US, which are absolutely out of control. So that's the difference. It's not about punishing them in prison. It's about rehabilitating them into society and providing them with another option. Not, we understand this through psychology. So, here is a classic example of why Christian sort of ethics is really bad, because you're still working under eye for an eye, punish these people, make them suffer. It doesn't actually help if your goal is to have less crime. What does help? Rehabilitation.
See, this is a problem, because when you talk for long periods of time, you throw out like 5 different points. So I'm going to try to remember all of them and address them now. 1, you said how moral of you. Don't answer yet, because I want to get through all of this. Do you believe that criminals shouldn't work for their food? I think that's pretty obvious. 2, you said that if you have a punitive system, then that doesn't mean less crime because of recidivism. I would ask you a second question. Remember these, because I have to get through all the points. We can't just go back and forth here. That you would have to say that having high punishments for crime doesn't deter criminals. So like, for example, the death penalty, if you have the death penalty for certain crimes, that's going to deter people from committing that crime regardless of recidivism. And then there was a third point you said, rehabilitative prisons. These systems do not operate apart from slavery. The state owns these people. They tell them when they can go to bed, what time they can eat, what they can eat. They tell them what's appropriate behavior and what's inappropriate behavior. And if in a rehabilitative prison, somebody acts out of line and they get physical, or they start swearing and yelling and going crazy, they will get pinned to the ground, handcuffed, and thrown in a cell. So you don't escape this problem, Mark. Go ahead.
Okay, so first off, the working for your food, I'm all in favor of sort of prisoners being given opportunity to do work programs in order to build up something to reintegrate with society. I'm all in favor of that. But working for your food and working for the profit of a company are two totally separate things. And you're already supporting this. It does not mean less crime. Yes, the statistics show that if like countries like Denmark, like Finland, like Sweden, Norway, these rehabilitative systems do produce less crime because people are given more of an opportunity to be a productive member of society. Death penalty does not help. It does not help in the slightest. We can tell from the death penalty that A, it's more expensive. B, it doesn't actually work in preventing crime. You would think it does, but it doesn't. State owns people. No, they don't. They never own them. They are guardians for them while they are incarcerated. It's not a matter of ownership. No one is ever owned by the state. And that's a really important point that you've completely missed. And it sort of shows just how under this idea of Christianity you are, that you think that the state owns people. It does not. Those prisoners still have the same rights as everybody else. So they can't be, as the Bible says, beaten into an inch of your life without, it being absolutely necessary in order for them to stop doing harm to others. That's incorrect.
All right. So working for the profit of a company, you realize that even a rehabilitative prison system, it needs prison guards, especially rehabilitative. I mean, they have much more drain on resources than a punitive system. They need a lot more therapists and nurses, all of these things, right? And I'm not saying all of that's bad, right? There's a happy middle ground, I'm sure, where you wouldn't say everything that these rehabilitative prisons do is good. I wouldn't say everything that these punitive systems do is good either. But when they're working, like, these people have to be paid. These prison guards, administration, all of these people have to be paid. So they are working for the profit of an organization. It just could happen to be a government organization. Just because it's not a private company making profit doesn't escape the economic benefit. I would like to see the statistics that say the death penalty doesn't stop criminals. There was a phenomenal debate on Sara's channel about a week ago, I think. Rachel Wilson was a part of it, and Mateus, I think, against two other people. I suggest everybody go watch that and make up their mind about the death penalty. The states own people. What would make it so that if I had somebody in my house, they could not leave, they could not have a family, they could not see their existing family unless I made it okay. I had to tell them when to go to bed, how much time they could be outside. Would you say that I owned this person?
No, you'd certainly be detaining them, though.
So would I have possession of this person?
No. Could you sell them?
What if I did? What if I found a black market and I sold them on it?
Would I then sell people?
They do, yeah.
They sell people. You think
all the time
sell people?
Absolutely.
Really?
Yes. When there's a prisoner, right, a gang leader.
Where can I buy a prisoner from?
Yeah, you just have to have the proper license.
Oh, so I can go online and I can buy somebody right now, can I?
You have to set up a private prison system, and then you have to get certain licenses. You have to get approved. Then you have to get the funds, probably some investors. And then what you do when you're starting out a private prison, in order to get people in, you go to the prisons that have the hardest criminals, and you go and you see them and you say, hey, I will take these people off of your hand. You just have to sell them to me. I need $100,000 for that prisoner. I'll take care of him.
And this is the prison system that you're claiming is moral.
I never said it was 100% moral. I'm just saying the state owns these people.
Well,
there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
No, they don't own people. They still have rights under
no,
law.
They don't have all the same rights, by the way. They lose almost all of their rights.
Well, no, they do. Some of the rights are they're
left?
not allowed to be confined under due process of law. Like, so you can't just, it's illegal to just, I don't know, send somebody to a South American country on a whim. That's against the law. Okay. So they do still have rights, even though they are prisoners. Can I just point out that this all came from basically me protesting at all of this sort of slavery in the Bible, and you pointing out that the prison system is basically this moral system like the Bible. And so you're now defending. Well, are you defending the prison system, or are you saying, hey,
I'm showing you that whether it's a punitive system or a rehabilitative system of prison, which you believe more in, either way, it's slavery. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You can't get around it.
No.
So you're condemning me for something you approve of. You're just inconsistent with your worldview.
Well, again, that's a tu quo quo fallacy. And
you started the tu quo quo.
No. I pointed out the Bible, and you said, "Hey, well, prisons." It does. You brought.
I asked you a question. You said, "Wait, let's talk about the Bible."
Sure.
That's how this all started. Yeah.
But we're not debating prisons at the moment. We're debating secular humanism versus Christianity, which is the most moral. So in the Bible, you can own people as property. Nowhere under secular humanism would that be acceptable at all.
Except I know you want to get off
horrendous. I know you want to get off the horrendous immorality in the Bible.
You just said let's get off of this topic.
To your Christianity claim.
No, you just said let's get off this topic, and I agreed with you.
No,
if you want to stay, we can stay here the whole debate because it looks great for me.
That Alex is now sort of, defending a prison system that nobody in secular humanism would approve of. It in every country. In this country, I'm not sure how it's viewed in the US. I don't think he's even right about prisons in the US, that the prison owns that person and can sell them to other prisons. I don't even think that's true.
You also don't have to have the right to sell something in order to own it.
Like what?
So museums do this all of the time. Somebody gifts them something. The museum retains ownership of it without the right to sell it.
Yeah, that's a very, very specific example. And if something's on
but it's possible.
License. Well, no, the museum.
It's possible to own something without the right to sell it.
Well, they don't own it if they're just displaying it on behalf of somebody else.
No, they own it. It's a lease agreement. They're leasing it to this person. When you lease a car, do you own the car? Of course you do. You just there's a financial company that has interest in your property and can put a lien on it, but they don't own it. You do. You're responsible for it.
If you lease a car, you don't own it. It's not your property. You're leasing it from some. I'm not sure if these terms mean something different in the US. It's weird.
Yeah, but leasing is not owner. It'd be like renting an apartment and trying to say own it. Like, you still have accountability and responsibility to take care of it while it's in your care or, on your person or whatever. But outside of that, you don't have ownership.
Okay, so if you finance the vehicle, you own it.
Well, yeah, but then you've gone into debt for it. You actually have paid for it and you own it.
So when you have, but there's also somebody who, like, you can't sell that vehicle. You can give it back to the no, you can't. You can give it back to the lien holder. So that's not selling it.
The lien. When did we get into liens?
When somebody,
I think you are so confused, Alex.
Hold on. I think you are too, Alex. So if I own a vehicle and let's say I have a loan out on it, I can sell that car all I want and still owe on that debt, right? So I could still. It actually can vary state to state, but yes, I can.
In most cases, you have to have the permission of the lien holder to do that.
No, it's not a lien. Okay, Alex, stop talking about law.
Finance I'm trying to make a point about ownership.
No, Alex. A lien is a legal obligation that's been settled in court that you owe somebody money. That's a lien.
No,
right,
dude. When you buy a house, the mortgage company puts a lien on your property. That's how it works.
The lien comes from going into like default. That's saying like
the lien on your house. There's a financial interest.
There's a financial interest, but
you cannot sell the house without the permission of the lien holder.
I've
on
never,
the title company. There's a lien from the title company.
Maybe this works differently in your country than in mine, but in my country, if you take out a loan and you get a house and you can sell the house, if you get the money from the house, you don't have to do it on the loan, but it's probably a good idea. Like I've known people who have bought a property, it hasn't worked out for them.
Banks would not loan money that way. No bank.
Can I finish? They have sold the property because it's no longer feasible to develop upon it, and they have paid off the loan with the money that they've recouped plus some of their own to cover the expenses. This is how property basically works in loans. But maybe it works differently over there. I don't know.
They had to pay it off. They wouldn't just pocket the money. Like if you sell a house for $500K and you owe $400,000 on it, you have to pay that 400 grand. You can't just pocket it.
Yes, but even if like I don't know if I really want you to go down the semantics. I don't know if you like comprehend all of how it operates, but yeah, you still owe. I could still like it. Essentially, if I'm selling my house, I'm probably buying another. Therefore, I'm going through the mortgage company, and I like in order to get that other big mortgage, I'd have to be able to pay. And there's like all of these different roundabout ways of doing things, but
It goes through a
it's
title company. And the title company
we're kind
has
of
to
really
fulfill
off
the
base
obligations. Well, you're talking about ownership,
Mm.
and I'm making examples of
I
ownership, and
know,
you're
but I
denying.
don't think this type of ownership necessarily follows through on the argument, and I don't think it's really the direction you'd want to go in that because this started with the idea of selling humans, right?
Yes.
And I think that I think that you're kind of off the mark going down the path of leasing vehicles and selling homes.
All right, I shouldn't have said lease, but if you finance the car is the point that I was making.
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
but
let's put it aside because I'm not great with finance, but I think you're worse, Alex. I don't think you're right.
I mean,
So
everybody can fact check this and see I was
Yeah.
exactly right, but I'm okay with that.
Okay, for sure. So you sort of pointed out that values and ideals change in secular humanism, and you're correct. I do see this as a strength as we learn more about the world around us, as we learn more about what makes people well and not well. Why wouldn't updating our information, like if we find out, say, lead is harmful, for instance, why wouldn't we then update what we ought to do via what we found out about these things?
Right. So I would agree that in that situation, like we paint houses with lead, we see lead is harmful, we stop painting houses with lead. We actually make laws against it so that people who own their properties can't use what they want on their properties for the safety of others, right? But it's not an issue of a moral change. The morality behind it is don't use harmful chemicals to paint your house. We don't know that lead is a harmful chemical. We find out it is, and it goes into that same moral category. So it's not a change in morality.
Where in the Bible does it say? Well, it is a change in morality. It's basically
not.
what we ought to do. Well, yes, and what we ought to do and what ought not to do. Where in the Bible
what's the morality change?
Change what you do based upon the well-being of others, or any kind of change?
Well, for example, there's the general equity of the law. There's a law that states that you need to build a fence around the top of your house. This was because people hung out at the tops of their houses and they wanted to protect people from falling off of the house, right? Because there was all sorts of liability issues. Obviously, people get hurt, they would die.
Well, I asked where in the Bible.
Then I'm telling you an answer if you don't want to interrupt me. Yeah. And so in this situation, we don't have rooftops that we hang out on. So where does this apply? Well, now we have something that they didn't have back then. Maybe they did, but pools, right? So now the law applies in a different way, just like you said. We have this new technology, or we find out this new information about lead paint. We change our law based on it, but it's not a morality change. The morality was already there. Don't use harmful chemicals to paint your house. Now, in the same way, don't make it dangerous for people who are hanging out in your house on the rooftop, or, for example, near a pool. Put up a fence around your pool.
Yeah, but none of that tells me where you got this morality from Christianity.
What do you mean?
I mean, I can say, hey, well, it is it's always a moral question of whether we ought to do something or whether we ought not to do something. That's always a moral question. But what is your definition of morals, Alex? What is your definition of morality?
Well, in this sense, like I can give you my Christian definition of Christian ethics. Christian ethics is the study and practice of right living based on the character, commands, and redemptive work of the triune God revealed in Scripture and applied by the church.
Yeah, so I guess the point I'm making, and that you didn't reference the Bible.
It's not always a moral.
Is that Alex, please? So what the point
you made
that
a statement
I am
that was
making?
false.
Well, I don't care. You can disagree with it, but let me speak, because you're just interrupting me now, which is kind of rude and obnoxious. So the idea of ethics, right living based upon the commandments of the Bible kind of thing, what I'm pointing out to you is there's certain things that we would say, hey, right living is something extra, right? That we shouldn't say, turn our music up loud or do all the stuff that's not in the Bible because circumstances have changed over time. And while I'm saying, hey, it's good that secular humanism changes over time because there's things that were not addressed in the past, you're sort of saying, hey, yours doesn't change. But I'm pointing out that you must have got this from somewhere, and it certainly wasn't the Bible. So where does it come from?
Got what? What specifically are you talking about?
Okay, it's like pools, for instance. Like you shouldn't fence in a pool. You didn't get that from the Bible, I can guarantee.
I told you exactly where I just got it from. It's the general equity of the law. And this is where the normative authority of the church comes in with church councils and canons. And they go through these things. And if something is a big enough moral issue, they will, during a council, have canons on how to address this. A random one was that a priest should not be riding a horse. Well, that was at a time where a horse was a luxury item. And they didn't want priests to be flaunting luxury around the common people because it was like boasting, right? So in this day, you could say, well, priests shouldn't be driving around Lamborghinis, right? It's the same moral law. It's just there's different technology and there's different resources that we have to be aware of.
Well, I would ask what church is a normative authority, because there's certainly preachers
That's a completely different
around. Excuse me, Alex, seriously, stop interrupting, man. It does not make you look good. There's a lot of pastors driving around.
He only just started, Alex.
It was
he
2
literally
seconds.
Said he did. He only said like 3 words and you interrupted him.
Are you high? What the hell? Look, there's pastors driving around a lot of private planes who say that's perfectly fine and dandy. So which is the normative authority, and according to who?
This is a completely separate debate. We've gotten so far off the topic.
No, it's about Christian ethics. You've said there's a
not
normative
what
authority,
church is the normative authority.
which evaluates what the actual morality of a situation is. You said there's a normative authority, which is the church, and I'm asking you, which church is it?
I mean, if you really want to go down here, we can. The Orthodox Church is the normative authority.
Okay.
You want to debate? You want to get into a debate about papism and the filioque too? While we're at it.
No, Catholics disagree with that.
Okay, but they still fall under the purview of Christian ethics. And there's very much agreement on these issues. This is so far off the topic of the debate.
But if you say to a Catholic, well, the Orthodox Church or the patriarchs are the normative authority on all of these moral questions, they will say, no, the papacy is.
Well, they would say to a degree.
The pontiff is. To a degree? What do you mean by to a degree?
Again, because this is so far off of the topic of the debate. Rome sees Eastern Orthodox as in communion with them. So they grant them certain authority, such as administering sacraments.
Oh, so the papacy grants them authority. So they're the normative authority.
You have, this is so far away from not only the topic of the debate, but what you're able to debate. So I do not want to go down there. Let's go back to the act, because one, I'm not even
I didn't start down this track.
Yes.
I asked you.
I
asked you what happens if they change over time, and you said that the church was the normative authority. And I asked which church, because there are many, many churches out there.
And now you're debating which church it is.
You said it's Eastern Orthodox, and I'm saying, hey, there's the majority of Christians would disagree with you. So how is it normative?
And who's the normative authority in secular humanism, Mark?
Scientific consensus.
Oh, and scientific consensus changes, right? So which scientific consensus is the right one? Is the scientific consensus that the jab was good? Is that the one that we should go with? Or is it the one that says the jab was bad? And who decides that?
The
Mark?
Consensus of scientists. What do you mean, Mark? Me?
Well, there is no consensus.
No, it's a consensus of the experts in the field, and that's how science works.
The experts that you like.
Well, no. I mean, I don't choose who the experts are.
So there aren't experts that are against the jab?
Which are experts in their field that will advise on the best way, like what actual reality is. And I covered this in my introduction. If you want to put religion up against science for figuring out things about the world, real things about the world, I am happy to take that fight. I would like to maybe ask you, what discoveries about our world has your religion made in the last 2,000 years?
Almost all of them, but anyway. I mean, I don't exactly know the specific, but literally 90% of the scientific discoveries were done by Christians over the last 2,000 years.
They're by science.
All right, so secular humanism has a grip on science. You can only do science if you're a secular. Oh, okay.
I didn't say that. No, I'm saying that
then it's
science
neutral.
is the most, excuse me, I'd like to answer. Science is the most effective way to find out about our reality. Whether or not you think it was Christians only doing it, which is just silly, but whatever, doesn't make it false in any way. What I'm telling you is we're looking to science to say, hey, what is the actual reality of this? And then saying what is the best for the well-being of people. You're saying that, hey, that doesn't matter. I'm going to go back to my authority of the church. And what I'm trying to get to is what kind of authority in our society do these priests actually have?
Does science give you prescriptions?
No. That's why you need something else.
Perfect. So you don't go to science to give you morality. Thank you.
Of course not. I go to secular humanism. Science just tells us about the world, right? It just describes the world. So, you know, we might discover and come up with a way to split an atom. Now, science doesn't tell us where, that's hilarious. Look, I got to point that out. That's actually hilarious. It doesn't tell us whether to make a nuclear power plant or a nuclear bomb. Okay, this is where we need more morality. And this is what I'm saying, that we can look to science and say, hey, it describes the world. We can use that for the benefit of human well-being. So if you just say, hey, I'm going to do whatever science discovers, that's probably a really bad idea. But if you say, hey, I want to develop this science and implement it in a way that provides for human well-being, then that is a moral system.
Yeah, but in what sense does a Christian ethics system not apply science?
Well, if it contradicts the science, you guys, you know, if it contradicts
secular
science,
humanism
would you
contradicts
believe
science
the
all the time.
patriarchs, or would it if you patriarchs say, hey, that is something we don't want to do? And there's a long history of this throughout the Christian church.
It's a
For
category
instance,
error.
No. For
Yes,
instance,
I can
the
explain
papacy
why.
basically
You're not gonna let me.
telling people in Africa that there's witches, and then that caused a lot of people to be, you know, burnt at the stake, basically. They also told people in Africa that the condoms help spread the AIDS virus. That was a bit of a problem as well. So if the science does conflict with their preconceived religious belief, yeah, they'll drop the science. I've got a vast history
And
of that.
same with you. The science says that life begins at conception, but you're okay with abortion, right, Mark?
Yeah.
Okay, so you go against the science too when it's convenient for you.
No, because that's a matter of personal autonomy, bodily autonomy. So even though somebody
is
breaking
bodily
into
autonomy
my
a
house,
scientific
can I
fact?
talk, or is you just
you
talk over me?
Alex,
these
no,
outright claims that are
Alex,
just nonsense.
Alex, you asked him a question and you have to let him answer it.
Yeah. I know you don't like the answers, but you've got to at least allow me the time to answer. If you've got somebody breaking into your house, that's certainly a life. And if they think that they're going to kill me, I can kill them for sure. They've entered my property. They basically infringed on my rights. That is something I'm allowed to do if I feel like my life is in danger. Now, the same is true of somebody that has somebody that's using their body for a purpose that they don't want it used for. That is bodily autonomy. It doesn't matter whether it's a life or not. It matters whether or not they have the right to preserve their bodily autonomy. So there is nothing unscientific about that. It's a matter of morality.
Right. And this is secular humanism. You see your children as parasites.
What do you mean?
That infringing on your personal bodily autonomy because you decided to have sex with somebody.
Is
so you
somebody
see them as
breaking
parasites.
into my house? Is someone breaking into my house a parasite?
And no, and neither is a child, by the way.
Well, yeah, then I don't think they're a parasite.
You just said it. You said they were infringing on your bodily autonomy, right?
Yes, they
living
are,
inside your body. Yeah.
Well, unless you consent, sure. That's the whole point. If you consent to it, it's not a problem.
Yeah, as long as you want the child. If you don't want them, fuck them. Anyway,
I didn't say that.
I would like to get back to my second.
Well, it's interesting because you bring up abortion, and I do.
So
have
you
a
can
point
interrupt
to make
me,
about
but I
abortion.
can't interrupt you. That's fine.
Okay. Well, I do want to make a point about this, but go on, Alex.
You can make a point about this because I want to move on to my second hypothetical that I had in my opening.
Okay, well, I'll make a point quickly. It'd be nice if the Christians, instead of, I don't know, lobbying the government to take away women's bodily autonomy, and they're, causing them to die out on tables because they can't get, entropic pregnancies taken away. It'd be really nice if they spent all that money like developing, a womb or something, an artificial womb or something like that, but they don't. So why not?
Well, Christians literally foster the most children. They donate the most money to all of these places. But that's a different issue, I guess.
Well, it doesn't answer my question.
What do you mean? You didn't even ask a question.
I did.
You just went on a monologue.
Well, no,
and talked about how you don't like Christians because they want mothers to stop unaliving their own children.
Is that what I said?
It's pretty much what you said. Yeah, they instead of lobbying against women's rights to unalive their own children.
Take it down a notch, Alex, because I don't think you're listening to me. Like that summation of what just happened is so far askew from what just actually happened. I don't.
Did you
like what I
did you
said?
Not say? Go ahead.
What I said was that Christians spend all this money trying to lobby and stop people from having their bodily autonomy, but they put absolutely nothing into developing like an artificial womb that would address the problem. Why not? Why don't they put all of that money into developing something that would address the problem?
One, I don't know the specifics of which research teams and companies think that a artificial womb is even viable, because we can't even make a baby live outside the womb after 20 something weeks. So I don't even know if that's on the table. But secondly, I don't know how I misrepresented what you said. You think it's mother's autonomy. I think it's unaliving their own children. That's why I phrased it that way. So I got that part right. The second part I got right was you said that why don't Christians focus on efforts to help these children? You said it in a different way of an artificial womb. I just said as they do. Most of the places that help these children and these mothers receive funds from Christians. Christians are the people donating to these places. Now, I would like to get to this second hypothetical, if you don't mind.
Okay, sure.
All right. So, all right. So if, I don't know why I use Trump so much. All right. No, I didn't use it. All right. So if there was, we went over the slavery one. This has to do with eugenics. If the data shows that a certain group based on region, income, or intelligence consistently draws more from public resources than it gives back, and the same group shows higher rates of crime, poverty, and long-term social dependence, and efforts to reverse these trends have failed, if researchers find that forced sterilization dramatically reduces these burdens, less suffering, less poverty, fewer crimes, society flourishes. What in the Humanist Manifesto says that this is immoral?
Autonomy.
Okay, so if it violates anybody's autonomy, even for the sake of human flourishing, we can't do it.
That's correct.
Okay. So even one person. So,
well, I'm just sort of going over like if you basically have the dignity of humans and their freedom being upheld or their autonomy being upheld, you need consent in order to do anything to them. Take their blood, for instance, you need consent to do that. Like it's kind of wild at the moment that you're saying, hey, what would prevent that? And it's like, well, what would prevent it if your God told you to do it?
Well, hold on. Before you start asking me questions, I want to finish this line of reasoning.
Okay.
If this is perfect, Mark. You said if you're infringing on somebody's autonomy, then no matter what, even if it's beneficial to society, you can't do it, right?
Well, it depends on the circumstances. If somebody breaks into my house and I infringe on their autonomy, then yeah, that's totally fine.
Why? Because it promotes your flourishing?
Because they're violating my rights, yes.
Okay, so what if these people are violating the rights of society by not allowing them to flourish in the way that they could?
What are the rights of society?
Well, to flourish as a society.
Everybody
has the right to pursue happiness, the right to flourish. So
I'm not familiar with this. It feels like now that you're making a straw man.
If you want to go down this route, we definitely can. You said that secular humanism has nothing to do with supernatural.
Down this route.
You just went down here with rights. If you want to say that secular humanism is without supernaturalism, explain human rights. Where are they in nature, and where can I find them?
Yeah, so this is explained a lot in The Social Contract by John Rawls. We basically have the power inherently laying in the hands of the people. Essentially, that is where power lays, and there is nothing a dictator can do if all of the people are against him. So essentially, what we do is we transfer authority to a government and do not transfer all of our rights. So it is what the people decide that the rights are, and we don't transfer that to the government. So essentially, it is a function of power that we have rights, because if the government violates it, they break the social contract. If they break the social contract, then that government will not, they have to enforce consent either by force or by consent of the people, like, getting the people's assent to that happening.
Okay. And so rights are a social contract.
Yeah, essentially,
Okay.
yeah.
Which scientific experiment gives us these social contracts?
I'm sorry, what?
Which scientific experiment gives us these social contracts?
Are you talking about sociology, like the things that they've done in sociology?
I'm talking about a empirical scientific experiment that gives us
Alex,
these social
you know
contracts.
that social constructs like money, it's like saying, well, which experiment gives us the value of money? It's a category error, because
Right,
you're
so
basically saying, hey, what empirical testing can we do on something that we've socially constructed by agreement between people? So money, for instance, is worth nothing, but we all agree that it's worth something. It's as stupid as asking, what's the scientific experiment on the value of money?
So it's supernatural.
I'm really sorry. Is money supernatural?
Is it outside the realms of scientific experiment?
Well, yeah, it's imaginary.
Oh, so are imaginary things natural, Mark?
Are imaginary things natural?
Like human rights? Okay, so human rights are not found within the realm of nature. So what does that have to do with secular humanism, Mark?
I don't understand what you're trying to ask.
You said that secular humanism has nothing to do with the supernatural, and yet human rights are supernatural.
What? What's your definition of supernatural?
Attributed to some force beyond scientific understanding or the laws of nature.
The imagination is not beyond scientific understanding, and we understand what the imagination is. Is Super Mario? Hang on. Is Super Mario Brothers supernatural?
Well, no, it literally exists on a computer.
But it's not natural, is it?
Yes, it is. It literally
is
exists.
Natural.
I mean, whether or not it's natural doesn't take apart from the fact that human rights are not natural, that they're supernatural, and that they have nothing to do with secular humanism. You can't claim to be a secular humanist.
I think you're sort of mucking up like supernatural and abstractions, because abstractions we understand because they come from our own minds. You're sort of messing that up completely. It's like if I think of a snuffleupagus right now, then that's supernatural. I don't know how you get to that.
Well, so human rights only exist in our thoughts?
Well, because you can't do a scientific experiment on the snuffleupagus in my head, then it must be supernatural, Alex.
Does the snuffleupagus exist in reality?
Does
I guess the question is like, at what point, when it's materialized outside of thought, is that where you're getting to, Alex?
Well,
when like Super Mario Brothers is materialized, right? It's a video game. You can play it, you can touch it. It's got fiber optics and little lights, so it is a thing.
Yeah.
So I guess we're going from the thought process of when it's a thought to when it's materialized, correct?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. And I guess like social constructs, they're the same. They're materialized in some way. We codified and we've written down the value of money. We have a currency that we put into place. All of this it doesn't make it supernatural. But I really want to go back to, if your God told you to do all of these things, right? What makes it immoral?
Well, morality is based on God's law and his commands. So yes, if God were to tell me these things, of course we would do them. but that would go against his very nature, as prescribed, as he has revealed himself.
Oh, sorry. So where does morality come from in your view? Is morality what God says it is, or is morality found somewhere else and God's relaying it to us?
No, this is the Euthyphro dilemma, which is a false dilemma.
Mhm.
And you should know this by now, Mark.
Okay, so what's the third option?
That it's within God's nature.
Okay, so it comes from somewhere else. So you're saying that God that morality follows God's nature. That's where you get your moral command, like preachments from. That's what you do.
Good has an ontology. God is good. Now, evil does not have an ontology. It's a privation of good.
Okay, that's not what I asked. Does your morality follow God's nature?
So the moral laws are based upon God's nature. Now,
Right.
I don't follow the moral laws exactly. I don't know what you're asking.
And does God do things in his nature?
What do you mean, does God do things in his nature?
Well, as far as I know, everything acts according to its nature, right?
I'm not exactly sure what you're saying.
Well,
like, yes, every one
nature.
of God's acts is in line with his nature. Sure.
Yeah. So when he slaughtered the Amalekites and the Midianites and, ordered genocide committed on them, that must be a moral act because it is in his nature. If he does things in accordance with his nature, I'll just explain this for the audience. If he does things in accordance to his nature and slaughtering Midianites is in accordance to his nature, what makes slaughtering of somebody, if you think God commanded you to do it, what makes that immoral?
So first off, it would be moral. And look, there's justification for these things. Do you think that there is no way in which there could be a justification for the slaughter of a people?
Oh, no, give us the justification of genocide. Go for it, Alex.
Okay, let's say there was a group of men raping all of your family members. Do you think the slaughter of them would be justified?
Of my family members? No.
Yeah. Oh, you don't. So you would just let them do it. That's awesome.
My family members, because don't forget the justification for the Midianites and Ebonites and all of the other tribes that were slaughtered is that they were doing unclean practices and sacrificing their children. Mm-hmm. But don't forget, they killed everybody, including the people that come along. Are you serious?
This is hyperbolic language, and later in the chapters, we see that these people were not all killed. They survived. They were still there.
They kept in one of the slaughters, they were told by Moses to go back in because he was angry they hadn't slaughtered everybody. And he said, kill everybody, including the animals. I don't know how they could be evil, but apparently so. And another one, they were told to slaughter everybody except for the young girls who had never known a man, and those would be taken back to the tribe of Israel for pretty obvious reasons.
No, not pretty obvious reasons. Why don't you explain to us, Mark, while you butcher the Bible? Go ahead. Give us your interpretation of this. What are the obvious reasons they were taken back for? Why don't you explain to us in the audience?
Well, they were shared out between the tribes.
And where does that
given to the church?
As what?
As what? As slaves.
Slaves for what? What did they do?
What do you mean?
Like, what are you implying here? Flesh it out.
Well, I think that the implication there is because they had never known a man, that was the deciding factor whether a young woman would be killed or not be killed. And so they took all of the women that had not known a man back to their tribe. And I think that the obvious conclusion
it's not obvious.
is they were used as slaves in the household of those that were given them, livestock, essentially.
So what does that imply? All right. So what I'm getting at is a lot of people like to take these verses and imply that they were taken back and used as sex dolls. Is that what you're implying?
I don't think that's necessarily the case in the culture at the time, but certainly they would be married to somebody if possible, and they would not have control over where they lived or who they married, just like because that was the time that they lived in. That was seen as the usual way of doing things.
I'll give you some points because a lot of times when I get into these conversations, when they say that it's obvious what happened to them, I know you watch these debates, you're involved in this. They imply that they're going to be like sex slaves or something, right? But I wouldn't say that they didn't have a choice.
It's hard. What choice did they have?
You don't think that they could have not married somebody?
It literally says they were taken as plunder. They were literally plunder.
And so they were sold into slavery, but that doesn't mean they had to marry somebody.
I'm not sure if you're aware of what being a female slave in that time was like. For instance, there's a passage in the Bible saying that when a man sells his daughter, that he should, if she is not pleasing to the person she's sold to, he should be able to redeem her with, kind of thing. So there's all these passages in there about literally a guy selling his daughter. So that daughter did not get a choice over who she was sold to and who she was married to.
But what does it mean that she was not pleasing to the master?
I don't know. Just that the master.
It means that she wouldn't marry him.
And this is the moral system.
So first off, a lot of this stuff is due to a lack of technology, right? They don't have debt systems. You can't go get a credit card and get yourself out of debt. So you could die on the side of the road and hope somebody would help you, or you could do things that were awful that no man would ever want to do. Just as if I started doing drugs and ended up on the street, there's no way, nothing in me would want to give my kids up, even if that was the right thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree that moral relativism is a thing, that in certain situations we have to prioritize certain things, and I would agree with that. However, God knew that there was credit cards, and God obviously would have a better system, but didn't. But it really doesn't get to my point of what would prevent a Christian that thought massacring a people and taking their daughters, their unknown to men daughters as plunder would be immoral if you think God tells you to do that, because you said, and you said it quite clearly, that everything in God's nature is moral. So how would that be immoral? It wouldn't be, right?
I want to get this straight. You said God's evil because he didn't give the Israelites credit cards?
I'd never said that.
Well, you said God knew what credit cards were. So instead of having this slavery system, he could have just gave them credit cards, right?
Well, could he have given them a better system?
He was working with the technology they had at the time. If your argument is God is evil because he didn't upgrade people's technology, that's a bad argument. But I mean, this is, I guess
there
it's
was
on
better
topic a little
systems
bit,
around
but
at the time. In the Levant, there were better systems. There were worse systems, but there were better systems.
Like what?
Like, for instance, Romans, women had a lot more rights. He could have taken the women's rights from that. He could have taken from the Greeks certain things about, say,
what time is this?
democracy. Well, why should it matter for God what time it is?
Because we're talking about the technology, and you said at the time
Isn't God
there was better
isn't
technology.
God timeless?
Oh my God. So because God didn't drop
we're not
cyber
talking
trucks
about
into the desert for the
No,
Israelites,
no,
he's
we're
evil.
not talking. We're not
Hold
talking
on,
about
hold on.
better technology. We're talking about better systems, better ways of thinking.
Is a system technology?
No, not necessarily. No.
What?
Like,
Come
so
on,
do
Mark.
you think a system of government is technology?
By definition, yes.
So totalitarianism, as opposed to democracy, is
Different
technology.
technologies.
Okay, I don't know what you're talking about. Different technology.
Can you define technology for me?
Technology is it's basically the mechanical and scientific endeavors of a community. It is things like having slate tablets to pen and paper to aeroplanes. It's not like
So knowledge
better
is not
idea.
a system of knowledge is not considered technology.
A system of knowledge is not considered technology. No.
Technology is not the application of conceptual knowledge.
No.
Okay. I mean, you just need a dictionary, but that's fine.
Engineering is, well, that gives usages, not definitions.
Okay.
But I still haven't heard my question answered. The question was,
go ahead. What was the question?
Would make this immoral if you think that slaughtering a whole bunch of people commanded by God, what makes it immoral?
Well, we just agreed that there are, well, actually, you said you wouldn't slaughter somebody if they raped your family. That's, I mean, if you can't agree then I guess there is no justification
I
for
didn't
slaughtering
say that.
people.
I said I wouldn't slaughter my family if someone raped my family.
That's not the question I asked you. I asked you, would you slaughter people if they were raping your family?
No.
Okay, so then we agree. According to you, there is no justification to slaughter people, even if they were horrifically raping your family. So, all right, in your system, I guess you're holier than all of us.
Hang on. We've got to like give context here. If you're talking about there being currently attacked, then yeah. Well,
okay.
I mean, it doesn't. If you're talking about capital punishment, then no. But it's just a dodge around the question, because in this story, they killed the people that they claimed were being sort of, having horrible things happening to them. So we've got to get a clear analog, a clear analogy between your graping family and that situation that happened in the Bible. Yeah. And it still doesn't answer the question of whether it is moral. It sounds like you're trying to say, yes, it would be moral. So you have just said it would be moral to genocide people.
It's hard to have conversations when you throw out 6 different points, right? Like you have to go step by step.
This is all the one point.
Well, you had multiple points here that I'm not going to be able to address all because you just throw them out and see what sticks to the wall.
There's two. It wasn't a decent analogy, and you didn't answer the question. That's 2 points. That's all.
All right, go back through step by step here because you threw out more than 2 and it's hard to follow.
So your analogy is people raping your family. And I said the family would be killed in that case because that's what they did to the Midianites and the Ebionites and the Amalekites and all of those other people. So that would be the analogy. Hang on. Let me finish.
I said step by step.
No,
that's the first stop. Let me address
it. You wanted a explanation. Stop. Like, seriously, you asked for an explanation.
You're going to throw out another point right now. But that's because I said, let's go point by point.
And you're about point. It's the same point, Alex. Jesus. The analogy is that, hey, I would just kill the person raping my family. But the correct analogy is I would kill everybody except for maybe my younger sister because they haven't known the touch of a man. That would be the correct analogy. The second point was it still doesn't answer.
Dude. I said point by point, and you're about to just
okay. That's the first point, and I know you're trying to ignore whether or not to say it's moral. You're trying to get around
and let me answer you now. Thank you. No, it wasn't an analogy comparing the situations. I was throwing a hypothetical out there to show you that in some certain circumstances, it is justifiable to slaughter a people. Now, if you want a one-on-one analogy, can a victim be a victimizer?
Okay, can we just all pause for a second and
answer my question.
Sometimes it is answer my question to slaughter an entire people. This is Christian
appeal to the audience and Gish Gallop.
I just want to touch on that
answer my question.
Second. We just got
you agree that there is a
slaughter people.
You agree?
No, thank you. I appreciate it.
You literally agree.
Oh, I did not agree. It was moral.
So you wouldn't slaughter people graping your family. Are we going to go back over this another time?
No, I wouldn't slaughter people.
Yeah, exactly.
I defend
because
them,
you're a cuck and you would let people grape your family, is what you're telling everybody.
Wow,
that's not what he said. That's literally not what he said.
He said,
let me offer some clarity here, because he specifically said if it was in the moment, he would take care of it if he could. Right. But he's saying if it's after the fact, right? The harm is already done to his family. We here in America, as you well know, Alex, have a justice system that serves and does on our behalf to take care of those things. So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, I believe he is adhering to allowing the justice system to do its purpose and job instead of 10 days later randomly going and tracking that person down and killing them. Right.
I understand that.
I don't. Well, just as an aside, sorry, Sarah, I don't support capital punishment either. It doesn't work. It's not helpful. So I don't support that either. Okay. So no, I wouldn't after the fact. Okay, go for it.
No, so I wasn't giving an analogy to compare the situations. I was giving a hypothetical. Huh?
Then why bring it up?
Because I'm telling you why. If you listen, you always complain about people interrupting you and then you interrupt. It's hilarious. I don't mind it because it's a discussion. We can interrupt. That's fine. But the reason I brought it up, like I already explained, is it's a hypothetical to say that there is a situation, and you agreed to it, where under the right context and in certain circumstances, there is a justification for the slaughter of people.
Well, it depends what you mean by a people, because if you mean an entire tribe, I don't think
don't.
there's a justification for that.
But I did give you the hypothetical, and in that hypothetical, you would agree, correct?
I would try to stop them. Yeah.
Can you?
I never said I would
All right,
slaughter
so
them.
you
Like,
would agree. Can you just?
if I stopped them and tied them up. No, this is your hypothetical, so
No,
don't
yeah.
just run away from it. Like,
Yeah, so you're
okay,
changing the hypothetical.
Call me a cuck again. That
You're-
adds to the conversation.
All right, cuck.
That shows your morality. You know,
I
like
think all right,
that is your
one's in the chat
morality.
if Mark is a cuck.
Yeah.
Anyway,
this is the
I
level
don't know
of
if
discourse
I
we get
yeah I
from-
don't know if your points, Alex, are driving home. And I think maybe, did you have another talking point you wanted to go into, or maybe Mark, if you had another one you wanted to dive into, because I don't know if this one establishes the morality, because we're taking a pastime from the Bible of a situation where none of us were there, and we're also applying that with our today's society and justification system.
Yes.
And I feel like maybe at this point it's moot because nobody's translating between the two between you guys.
all right,
So-
yeah, that's fair.
That's called
Mark has another point.
presentism. Yeah, that's
Yes.
presentism, where you're basically applying morality to people in the past who had no idea about that moral system. The problem there is that presentism is moral relativism. It's saying under different circumstances, we would have a different moral code. So in order to use presentism, you have to appeal to moral relativism. That is just how it is. My point is that any of this behavior would be moral as
Are we
long
moving
as
past this? I thought like.
Yeah, okay. Move past it.
Let him finish.
I mean, if
Oh,
he's
that's
gonna
fine,
finish,
that's
and then I'm
fine.
gonna want to say something, and we're gonna keep going.
Well,
we
I
can keep
mean-
going on it, but you seemed like you wanted to move past this, Sarah. That's all. I'm
Alex thinks it's moral to slaughter people. I mean, yeah.
And Mark is a cuck who would let people grape his family and do nothing about it. So there we are.
Christian
You-
morality.
You have another. You have another
Christian
point, Mark, that
morality,
you wanna get
ladies
to
and
now?
gentlemen. Christian morality. This is what it leads to: persecution.
You said you had another
name-calling.
point.
No, it's fine. I think I'm good with your,
Cool.
incredibly moral name calling there.
Well, if you could have answered a question straight instead of gish galloping, we would have been in a different position.
I wasn't the one desperately trying to avoid whether it be moral to slaughter people, and it's horrifying that you think it'd be moral.
I
to
said
slaughter
yes,
people.
and I was showing you that exactly why you would also, in certain circumstances, agree, but you wouldn't answer a hypothetical straight. So that's why we ended up in this position, Mark.
Well,
Just
it's not a
wanted you to know that.
straightforward hypothetical.
Well, you literally can't answer hypothetical. Mark, how would you feel this morning if you didn't eat breakfast?
Hungry.
Okay, perfect. You could have just did that, man, but you didn't want to.
Well, I think I still
What?
think your hypothetical wasn't really par for the course in this aspect, because it just, I don't
If
know.
you'd
I
like,
think
I
it's,
could finish my thought on it to wrap it all together, because I couldn't get to it.
Go
My
ahead,
whole thought, because it wasn't
wrap
an
it up.
analogy. I agree. It's not a one-to-one analogy, and I wasn't making it that way. It was a hypothetical to show that in certain contexts, it's justified to slaughter a group of people. And I would say, if you can imagine a situation where there's justification, the all-knowing, all-powerful God who created everything could have a moral justification for the things he does that we could not grasp. That's very easy to get to, in my opinion.
And I just want to make a point to that it doesn't have to be that God ordered you to do this. All that has to be is that Alex thinks God orders him to do it, and he would do it, and he thinks that's moral.
Completely false and a misrepresentation of my worldview.
Oh, that's what you said.
It's not, but okay.
Yeah, so anything can, this is where I point back to, anything can be justified if you think that a God is commanding you to do it. Anything. It's literally, he's saying, well, you can do all of these things under secular humanism when it specifically opposes it. But the most awful things, but don't forget, Alex gets his morality from God's nature. That is within God's nature. Therefore, it is moral.
And Mark gets his morality from his imagination that's completely natural and within scientific explanation.
Is scientific explanation in my imagination?
No, your imaginary thoughts are just determined by the physical processes in your brain, but we already went over that in a different debate.
Do you think your thoughts are real? Do you think your thoughts are real?
Do I think they exist in a realm that contains a mind? Yes. You don't think you have a mind, apparently.
Why would I not think that?
Because you just said everything's natural. So unless your mind is natural, Oof, that's a tough worldview to
When did I
swallow.
say everything's natural?
You said your thoughts were natural, which would imply your mind is natural.
Well, yeah.
Okay, so this is what you do, Mark. Like, when did I say that? I didn't agree to that. Well, yeah.
You said everything's natural, not my mind is natural. Okay. Do you not hear what you say?
There are supernatural things?
I don't know. I don't think so. How can I tell what's supernatural? Can you give me an example of something supernatural?
I don't believe everything is natural. Well, I don't know. I mean,
well, I don't think
it's wild. Why do you do that?
Do what?
You play on the fence of like, I didn't say that, but then when pressed on it, you're like, well, yeah, that's pretty much what I think.
Yeah, it's because you're straw manning. You're basically saying that I said that everything is natural, and I never actually said that. I said that my thoughts, my brain, my mind is natural. So you're actually misrepresenting me while then trying to claim that I've said something else, which is what you've done a lot throughout this debate, actually.
You're quibbling over
the fact
words.
that well, I mean, I think I've only ever seen
everything you could ever think of.
Please show me something. Can you please?
It's not what he said, Alex. I would agree with. But Mark has been very concise with his points, and I think you are kind of feathering them out a little to make them work with what you want to push in your arguments. And I can agree with Mark on that. That you're doing that, Alex. So I think the whole concept of naturalism is he was comparing the idea of a thought process, right? Just because I think of something doesn't make it necessary, so on and so forth. And that's why I offered the translation of when something materializes, going from is it natural to something that's actually materialized, like a thought, a creativity, imagination, whatever, into materializing it.
I mean, it seems a little dishonest to me when someone says, I didn't say everything is natural, but when I ask them if they think anything is supernatural, they say, no, I can't think of anything. I mean, it's pretty dishonest.
Could you show me something supernatural? What's your example of something
That's not the point. The point is you think everything that you could, like literally anything you could imagine, you think is natural. But when I ask you if everything is natural, you're like, well, I don't know. Could you tell me if something?
Well, everything I'm aware of is natural. I've never seen anything.
So that's the dishonesty and quibbling over words I'm talking
about.
No.
It's just being very precise in my language, because while I don't think there is anything supernatural, I've never seen it. My position on that is provisional. As soon as I'm showed something supernatural or someone makes me aware of something supernatural, I'll believe that there's something is supernatural, but not a moment beforehand. So me asking you then, like, what is it supernatural? Okay. You're just refusing to answer.
Is all water wet, Mark?
What do you mean?
Is all water wet?
I don't know. Probably, yeah.
Okay,
well,
so
wetness isn't a thing. It's
can you show me water that doesn't get you wet? It could be possible. So don't say all water is wet, Mark. If you don't want like those words, can all water get you wet?
I don't understand what the hell you're talking about.
Right, because when I say is everything natural, and you're like, well, there could be something that I'm completely unaware of that is supernatural and I don't know.
Yes.
Then you would also have to say that if I say, can all water get you wet? You would have to say no. Why? Well, because all water that I can think of can get you wet, but there could be some imagination of water that I don't know about that could not get you wet. That's the dishonesty I'm talking about.
So wetness isn't an actual thing. So you can wear hydrophobic material and then it won't get you wet. I don't understand. Are you okay?
Wild.
Because
no,
I'm saying
amazing.
I'm saying that I don't know of anything supernatural. You're saying you do. When I ask about that, you go into this, is water wet?
Because I'm showing the dishonesty and I think everybody can see that.
What do you mean? I mean, like, what you want me to say? I know for
Mark
a fact there's nothing supernatural in the entire universe. That's what you want me to say. But I don't never.
Here's what's going on. You're trying to get him by you saying he's being dishonest. You're implying that he's being bad faith and not answering. He's answering with leaving room for error, right? That would actually make him be more honest. Like, just for instance, like, do you believe in aliens or whatever? And it's like, well, I mean, I've never seen one, but not to say they're not there. right? He's
Sure.
leaving room for error. That's all he's doing, and that's what is keeping him honest and in good faith in the conversation by admitting there may be a situation that he just hasn't come across or something that he doesn't know, right? I think that that's all he's trying to imply. He's not trying to be an asshole.
I understand. I don't see it that way, but
awkward silence. Okay, here's what we'll do.
I don't know what the hell water has got to do with any of this. It's so weird.
I see what he's saying. I understand where Alex is trying to go with it. I just don't think that it works in this instance because you're not trying to like scapegoat away from the question or anything like that. You're answering very honestly and leaving room for error. He's implying that you're not leaving room for error, right? Like that's what he's trying.
Okay. Well, I do have a question for Alex that'll maybe start us off again. Would you acknowledge that Christianity has made some horrible, grievous errors in the way that has implemented its morality in the past?
of course.
Okay. Why should we now believe that the normative interpretations by the same institutions would provide a better answer?
Well, just based on the studies I provided, I mean, we didn't get into the studies, and I don't think we have time to do that now. But I did. I mean, I don't think you didn't provide pushback because you don't have any, but we didn't get into any pushback. So I'm just assuming that maybe you don't have any on the studies. But we do see a lot of these studies in the way that modern Christianity has played out in our societies has made our societies a lot better than any other ideology.
I certainly say that Christianity has contributed to the way society has turned out. I would sort of say the Enlightenment is really where the turn took, and that was a lot of deists and atheists as well, Voltaire and people like great thinkers as well that were not Christians. So I don't see Christianity, with the horrendous thing that it's done in any way counterbalanced by good things that they've done. Just because, like, for instance, all the universities, there was only Christians around at the time, because you were kind of, killed for not being a Christian.
So you can't think of anything good that Christians have done for society, or did I mishear that?
I
might have misheard that. I'm not trying to be bad faith there. That sounds like you said you can't think. Bro, you said you can't think of anything that would outweigh the bad that Christianity has done.
I don't know what you're hearing. I said I am certainly not dismissing the good that Christianity has done for society.
All right, I misheard. I'm sorry.
Absolutely, like all the universities, all of the studies, but that has to be taken into account with all of the horrors that it has committed. And at the time, only Christians were around. So because only Christians were around and you were, subject to the Inquisition if you weren't a Christian, they were responsible for all the good and the bad because there was just Christians around.
Well, with the universities in America, that's not true at all. The Inquisitions weren't happening then.
It still was
in America.
Well, yeah. I mean, you still had the Puritanians versus the Quakers, for instance. They were being persecuted there. You had, as an atheist in that time, you still had the Salem witch trials later on. I mean,
Thomas Jefferson was literally taking books out of the Bible, and he wasn't persecuted for it. So,
well, sure, but he wasn't, your average sort of person out there, was he?
I mean, we have writings of the people who we know more of, obviously, who were higher in society, but
sure. And I do acknowledge that a lot of the founding fathers were Christian, sure, but a lot of them were deist, which means that they don't have a moral system from Christianity. They took it as a secular moral system, and some of them were atheist.
So, I mean, genuinely asking, if you could wake up tomorrow, snap your fingers, and you could be in your country, I don't know exactly where you live, I can guess, but I don't even need to do any of that. In your country, if you could snap your fingers tomorrow and wake up and 99% of the population was atheist or 99% of the population was Christian, what would you choose? Or secular humanist for the debate?
I would like to live in a secular humanist society. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just curious.
Yeah,
Because I'm sure you
absolutely.
are aware of a lot of atheists who would answer the opposite, right?
What do you mean?
Like they would say they would actually rather live in a Christian society.
Yeah, I think sort of when they say that they're usually given the choice, Christian as opposed to Islam or some other theocratical society. And if you gave me that choice, I would say Christian, but that doesn't
That's a
mean I think
different,
that
yeah.
Christianity is better than secular humanism.
Yeah, I get that.
I think there's a lot of organizations that we would call secular humanists, like Médecins Sans Frontières, for instance, Doctors Without Borders, like things like that, where they don't have religion and they don't recognize any kind of human distinction. They are just simply out to serve humans. So, as the first priority, I would consider myself as a member of the human species and not as an Australian, for instance, is the country you're looking for there.
Cool. Yeah, I didn't know. I didn't. Sometimes some people aren't open with where they're from, so I didn't want to say that if you weren't.
No, I'm fine. I'm
Yeah.
fine.
No, so I guess like what I was pointing to was like when Dawkins had that interview. Remember that where he was like, "I'm a cultural Christian. I like Christmas carols."
Yeah, he kind of is just saying that our culture has been shaped by Christianity just simply because it's gone through this sort of long line of Christianity only going back to Middle Ages and things like that. That isn't necessarily a good thing. It still has some sort of hangovers from that time, as I pointed out. Colonialism, for instance, the doctrine of discovery, where they only considered Christian people to be people. A lot of it has those problems still hanging around. So I think that culturally Christian, sure, I get what he's saying. That doesn't mean he's a
Yeah.
Christian, doesn't mean he believes
No,
in a
no, of
God. He
course.
just thinks he's cultural and, Christmas, Easter, that kind of thing.
Now, here's a kind of different question that popped in my head along the same lines. If the statistics that I gave were true, and I could go over them for you if you forgot them, it's been like 2 hours since I said them. But if the statistics were true, um, even if Christianity was false, wouldn't it be better for people to believe in it?
No. In the short term, it may be helpful for individuals, but over the long term, it would not be. We have a problem with Christianity. Well, there's a couple of problems. Number one is that because the study you're talking about is better mental health outcomes for Christians, the problem there is, and I've seen it a lot, is Christians do not frame their mental health problems as mental health. They frame them as spiritual problems, and they don't actually seek any kind of treatment or any kind of help for them. They go to their pastor and say, "Hey, I'm having a spiritual issue," when in fact it's a mental health issue. So I think that can be skewed, and the expectation that people in religions are expected to be happier. And a lot of people pretend to be happy because that is what's expected of them. And I've got some stuff on that if you do want it. The other problem is that there are certain problems that we're facing in the world, like climate change. We're facing, asteroid almost came close to hitting us in 2019. It was called OK 2019. We have these problems, and from our point of view, we don't have some kind of magical guy to save us from any of that. So on the short term, yeah, maybe we'd be happier thinking that we're going to be saved by some god, but I don't think in the long term that's necessarily good for the continuing sort of health of society or the earth at all.
Okay. So just to press the question harder, I think the
Yeah.
study was about unalivement rates. So I think that would probably be different. But
Sure.
as far as the question, so like even if so like let's say you said there might be some problems, and some of those sounded interesting. I would like to hear more. You could send me those studies or those things you said.
Sure.
If there were no problems with the studies and it showed that believing in Christianity, even if it wasn't true, made people happier, made people more successful, made societies thrive more, would you still say, even in that situation, that it would still not be good for people to believe in it?
Yeah, I'm not aware of any studies that particularly specify, because it's not just sort of Christianity against atheism here, it's Christianity versus secular humanism. And you can be atheist and be a nihilist, for instance. you can be an atheist and be a secular humanist. Those are two very different worldviews, or views on how the world operates. So I'm not certain of any sort of benefit Christianity has over secular humanism in that regard. If it made people more comfortable, well, yeah, certain things will make us feel more comfortable. Like, for instance, if I think I'm going to win the lotto tomorrow, I might be a lot happier. Right. But in the long run, right, as I sort of spend my winnings that I'm going to get tomorrow, in the long run, it's detrimental. So it's not just, well, we've got to look at the short-term stuff. We've got to look at the entire outcomes that we're going to. And I don't see telling people a lie and getting them to believe something that is not true as being, on the long term, good for society. It usually never is.
So, and I totally appreciate the answer. And it's not that I'm not hearing you. I understand the question. Understand your answer. Purely hypothetical, right? Definitive studies, Christianity makes societies thrive, secular humanism does not. Or even, just that, purely hypothetical. Would you still then say Christianity's false, don't believe in it?
Well, it depends what you mean by Christianity's false, don't believe in it. I mean, if it makes, like, as a hypothetical, if you're saying, hey, somehow reality changed and lying to people made them better off, I don't see how that could be possible. But when you say Christianity is true, even if Christianity was good for people, then I mean, I wouldn't believe in a God. Whether it's beneficial or whether there's a God are two totally separate things.
What I'm trying to get at is, in this pure hypothetical, it doesn't have to be possible within what you would see as reality being. But what I'm trying to get is, if there were a group of people who believed these things, would you sway them away from this belief if it did in fact show that they were going to live in the short term and long term much more fulfilled lives and their societies were going to thrive much more than if they followed secular humanism? Again, completely purely hypothetical. You still wouldn't?
Probably not. But that wouldn't stop me from talking about my own beliefs. That is important to my self-actualization. Being the best person I can be is to talk about what I believe and why I believe it. So in this sort of hypothetical that you're giving, it's very strange, because you're sort of saying, hey, when it becomes a good thing to lie horribly to people and make them believe in something that doesn't exist, and it's like, well, in what universe would that be the case, that having an inaccurate representation of reality would actually be a good thing?
Well, I would say human rights fall under that category. It's something we make up. It's something we make up that we give people in order to help society flourish.
Well, it's based upon something very real, however. It's based upon that if you are some sort of ruler or a governor or somebody that governs people, without the consent either forced or gained from those people, you don't rule. That is a fact.
So, and that's kind of what I'm getting at with the hypothetical. You're saying in this situation, because of these, not constraints, but because of these variables, better word, that human rights are believing in these human rights that aren't real, that we do make up. We can make them whatever we want them to be. We just make them a certain way because we believe this is the way that society thrives
They're
best.
agreed upon, yes, and that social contract is made with the government, yes.
I'm saying that's kind of the same thing as my pure hypothetical of, we make up this religion, we have this God, he has these rules, we follow them because it makes society flourish. It seems to me, I don't want to be bad faith here, it seems to me that there's a strong anti-Christian attitude that's preventing you from agreeing with the pure hypothetical.
No, I don't disagree with the pure hypothetical, and I answered it. It's just the hypothetical. I mean, you're really expecting things to change so much, that lying to people about the nature of reality, that, I mean, how are you giving dignity to people by lying to them and making them seem, telling them outright lies to make them conform to your ideas? That isn't upholding the dignity of people. That is basically manipulating them.
Yeah, I guess I would just say I could say the same thing about human rights. And I know we disagree on that, but
You think that sort of, people being the ultimate holders of power within society is a lie that we tell them, that they can't change the government. Is that what you're
No,
saying?
the lie is that they have these things that are called human rights. They're only enforced by violence through the government.
Well, no, because the people can always, like, it's consent of the people, and that consent can be forced with violence, sure, but at the end of the day, you have to have that in order to rule people, in
Right,
order to
because if
have a country in the first place, a society in the first place.
I agree, the consent makes things a lot easier, because if there wasn't the consent and the people rioted, they would use violence to take the power back. It's all
Yeah.
administered by violence.
And I mean, well, not necessarily. I mean, Gandhi managed to overthrow the most powerful empire in the world, and he didn't fire a single shot doing it.
And that's because the other people let him without violence.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if they chose to use
Well,
violence,
I mean,
then
there was a lot of violence. There was a lot of
okay.
violence. It's just
So
he
then it
didn't
was
stop.
administered through violence.
Well, no, because he just refused to work, right? So they provided most of the food for the British Empire. They provided a ton of food for the soldiers. If they don't work, and they don't work in the salt mines, you can force the government to do something that they don't want to do. And this is the most powerful empire in the entire world at the time. Vastly technological superiority. But if the people will not conform, there's almost nothing they can do about it. If the people are willing to die rather than to submit to totalitarianism, there is nothing they can do.
So they had to appeal to the people who had the ability of violence.
What do you mean?
Like, the people in power were still the ones capable of violence, and they had to appeal to them in order to get the power structure back.
Well, it's just that the way that they were going would not get them what they wanted, and it was a higher cost to keep cracking down and, making the Indian people conform than it was to let them have certain rights that they demanded.
Right. So instead of using their violence, they just gave them some form of power back.
Sure, that's the whole idea of the social
I got you.
contract. We're basically saying, hey, we allow ourselves to be ruled. On the flip side, we do not allow the government to do these things. And those things become our rights. Now, in secular humanism, it is based upon the very, like I went through in my introduction, the things that we need to be well. So we need to be happy and healthy, like our physiological needs, our food, water, shelter, all of these physiological needs. Our safety and security is another one, psychological need. And, ideally, with freedom and autonomy come self-actualization, the ability to be the best person that we can be. So we can withhold these rights. We can gain other rights. It's a matter of the people deciding what rights they have and what contract they have with the government. And that is why the government never owns anybody at any time.
Even in America, when slavery was legal, nobody was owned.
Well, yeah. But if you're claiming that's moral, I don't know what
No,
to do.
but I was just saying, you said nobody was ever owned.
Right, by the government. Did the government enslave people?
I mean, they had particular camps that were government run, yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, I don't know the history of that, but yeah, I can say that's incredibly immoral. And I think that sort of that violates every principle of liberalism. I would I think that's horrendously immoral. Do you think slavery is immoral?
I think that not all slavery is immoral, and I think we would all
Really?
agree. Yeah. And I don't want to rehash this. I mean, we're probably going to open panel soon.
Well, I'm
Maybe
just-
on the
just
open panel we could
interested.
talk about it more.
What slavery isn't immoral?
Rehabilitative prison systems.
I mean,
It's a
that's
form of
not
slavery. Yes, it is.
Well, no.
I would say it
No.
has all of the requirements of being slavery. You're restricted in your movement. You're restricted in your freedom. You can't have a family in prison. Like, you literally, that freedom is taken from you. You can't be the man of your house in a prison.
Yeah.
You're told when to eat, when to sleep, when to wake up.
Yeah,
And
circumstances don't equal slavery. The definition of slavery is when you are owned as property, right? That you are somebody else's asset that they can do with you as they want, even if that has rules around it. It still is that they own you as an asset, and I never consider that to be a moral thing because someone,
because at the end
think
there,
I'm gonna bump in on this one. I think that is a bigger conversation because I know there are arguments in both directions for that. And I would definitely not mind throwing that in on open panel if you guys want to, if you're okay with holding that thought, because we are at the 2-hour mark. And yeah, I know we could definitely have a bigger conversation because I know there's a lot of we had a whole conversation about prison systems. We had a debate about it, and I know it could go a lot of different directions, and I'd love to save that. So if you want, gentlemen, we can go ahead and go into closing statements, and then we'll read and respond to super chats, and then we'll get the panel opened up for you.
Cool.
Mark, would you like to kick us off?
Yeah. So I think what I've seen here, and maybe this is just my opinion, but what I've seen is a lot of acceding to a lot of really immoral stuff, just under certain circumstances. And I don't see the circumstances as moral. I don't see sort of taking this vengeance on people as being moral. I don't see a system owning people as moral. Like, that is deeply immoral. We all have a right to be free and not owned by another person. And so this is the Christian morality. It basically changes depending on which Christian you talk to, and not all Christians will agree with Alex, but I think what we've heard here is sort of the places that you can get to when your focus and your aim is to glorify a God rather than the actual well-being of people and society. Because if owning people as property is not good for society, and we know it's not good for society, either the slaves or the slaveholders. It's vastly immoral under my system, but apparently it's moral under Alex's. Slaughtering, an entire group of people based upon the ethnicity is immoral for me under any circumstance. Apparently it's moral for Alex if he thinks God allows him to do it. All of the horrible stuff that we've heard here, it's completely permissible when you're going into God's nature, because God in the Bible, his nature is all over the place from the Old Testament to the New. And that doesn't mean that all Christians are completely immoral. Most of them, I'm not looking for people being a secular humanist. What I'm looking for is moral compatibility. If you think God wants you to have a flourishing society and that people should be well, they should be happy and fulfilled in life, then we agree on almost everything. However, if you're basically going to say this is moral because my imaginary friend says so, then I don't even know how to discuss with you how to get to a better society. So I think in this, one person is focused on what is a better society, and one of them is focused on whatever is in God's nature that they can pull out, which suspiciously always aligns with what they personally believe. I cede my time.
Thank you, Mark. Alex, to you.
Yeah, so I think we had mostly a good conversation. I know it went off the rails there, mostly on my end a little bit. Sorry about that, Mark. Sarah's channel brings out the cage match in me, I swear. I think you know what it is. It's the 2 hours of open dialogue. There's no other place where that happens, so it's a different format of things,
mate, look, the chat is brutal. If I had hair, I'd be pulling it out right now. Like, seriously.
But I do think that Mark was unable to provide a reason why my hypotheticals were not in line with secular humanism. The answers he gave were, well, it affects the freedom of certain individuals. But he's willing to go against the freedom of certain individuals, such as criminals, when it benefits society. But when I gave him these hypotheticals, he would say, well, if it goes against even one person, you can go back and check. He said, even if it goes against one person's autonomy, then you shouldn't do it, even if it's a net positive to society. And I would say, well, what are we doing with our criminals then? We got into this whole discussion about rehabilitation and all that. But even under a model of rehabilitation, it's still slavery. It meets all the requirements. You can't tell me that if I did that to somebody and took them into my home and treated them that way, you wouldn't say that I had enslaved them. I do think that, yeah, I understand being on the end of a hypothetical you don't want to answer. I get that. But I do think that it's more powerful to just answer the hypothetical. I answered very many questions that are hard to answer straight up. I think just in debate alone, optically, biting the bullet goes a lot further than you would think. I also think that Mark doesn't necessarily understand all the entailments of his worldview. I'm sure he would say the same thing of me. I do appreciate the conversation. Always appreciate being on the Raging Tomato. Sub up, get those memberships in, super chat Sara to the moon. I appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's this was actually very interesting. What I kind of pulled from this is, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that secular humanism is like starts with the individual and works its way out, whereas I believe Alex, in your perspective, Christianity starts externally and works its way into the individual. Like there's a higher calling for everyone, working externally. And it's an interesting take to see that like really spelled out in this debate, because I haven't necessarily always heard it in that perspective between debaters. So I appreciate kind of a new, fresh take, or at least a way in which I understood it the way I did. So thank you to both of you. This was a really good conversation. Alex, I need to put you in your place sometimes because you are very big on interrupting, and I know you're working on it. I know you are, because you tend to do better each round, but we gotta nip that one in the bud.
That's why I need you, Sara.
Thank you. Every time you get out of line, I'll just throw my shoe at you. Sarcastic Warlock, and ladies and gentlemen, the link is dropped in the chat if you want to start hopping backstage. I know it's already filling up back there, so it's good to see all of that. Sarcastic Warlock with a big 5. Morality is the say it for me.
Idiosyncrasy.
Thank you. Of decadence. Oh my God! Actuated by a desire to avenge themselves with success upon life. Any thoughts, gentlemen?
I think we would
both.
Yeah,
Nietzsche was a nihilist, so he didn't believe in any morals at all. Which, I mean, you can be a moral nihilist and sort of place priorities on things, but Nietzsche was very depressing and sort of very anti any kind of utility. So yeah, I wouldn't agree with him.
Yeah, I think if you truly live out nihilism, I don't think anybody really can, besides some really dark people.
Fair enough. Sarcastic also follows up saying, honor is simply the morality of superior men. H.R. Mencken. Christianity enshrined itself and declared itself needed. Now honor is gone. Christianity is failing, and we're worse off than ever. You're welcome to respond if you want.
Okay. I don't know, that's an interesting thing to think about.
Well, I think that sort of honor is that self-actualization, being the best person that you can be, like talking with integrity, talking things, being able to keep your promises, being able to speak truthfully. That is all helpful in developing who you are as a person, and it helps society. It's very, very useful for society. Now, I don't think we're worse off than ever. I'm not sure why we would think that. I do note that some of the secular countries in Scandinavia, like Finland, has the best education system in the world, is a secular country. The Sweden has amazing systems going, secular country. Like all of these secular countries. I mean, Japan, for all of its idiosyncrasies and all of its problems, has done a really good job in building a beautiful city of Tokyo. They are secular, so I don't see how we're worse off. I wouldn't agree with that.
It is really interesting, the quote, because I think hopefully we all have at least one man in our life, and hopefully more, where when you're around them, you just know they're morally superior men. Like, they stick to their word. If they say something, they do it, right? They're not cowards. Like, I could list off a bunch of qualities, and I like that definition of honor because those no other way to describe those men but honorable. And I think we all can at least point to one man in our lives like that. At least I hope we can.
Okay. Very nice. Oops, my cursor's not working. All right. And Speedy Lee with a big 5. Man does not strive for happiness. Only Englishman does that.
What's up with all
I
these
think
Nietzsche quotes?
Well, I think he's making a commentary on sort of the happiness that's just like short-term pleasure kind of thing. I think that sort of happiness these days, like when we talk about the greatest happiness principle, we're not talking about, Yahoo, I won a game, or this short-term, I enjoyed some time. It's really talking about that deep life satisfaction with I am, fulfilling a role in society. I am doing well. I am loved, accepted. All of these things gives life satisfaction, which really that's what we're talking about. And I don't think it's just Englishmen that do that. I think all of us look for that.
Interesting. Big Bad Mama with the big 5 says even the charitable parts of Christianity are often justified by appeals to selfishness. Be generous so that you can get into heaven. Comments? I think that one's at you, Alex.
The charitable parts of Christianity are often justified appeals to selfishness. Be generous so they can get into heaven. I think that this is misplaced. While I do think there are Christians who only do things to quote unquote get into heaven, I think the true Christian attitude is not what can I do to get from God, but what can I do because of what God has done for me. Again, I think there are people who abuse that, but I think that is the true Christian attitude.
Yeah, I would say that
yeah,
that's
go ahead.
not extreme Christian. Like I think that most of the people I've talked to, but I guess that the fear of going to hell is the flip side of that. Like people are afraid of going to hell, and I think we see a lot of problems in that sphere with sort of religious trauma syndrome and things like that. That they still have this latent fear of hell, even though they're a good person, they've been doing good for society. And it seems to the secular humanist to be really unfortunate and sad that people still have this really constricting fear over them. It is really sad to me.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have a wrong idea of what hell is. I think I even had a wrong idea of what it was for a long time, but I think our background, what's that famous book? Was it Dante's Inferno? I think that's the conception of hell most people have, and I just don't buy it. But I do think that that wrong conception of hell, I would agree, Mark, it does produce an unhealthy mental state.
That's fair. And Powder Dusty sounding off with the big 50 and says, which group is most generous? Here's 50 on agnostics and atheists. Shots fired. Bait trap has been set.
Yeah, and that does actually support my point that it's found that atheists are more generous to whoever their out group, not just their in group. So that's something we've noticed.
Really? Huh. That's interesting. The bait was taken. Not my circus, says the Big 10 to say agnostic, but then Brandon sends 50 and says, tell Slow State virtue signaling is cringe as fuck, but I'd be willing to debate him if he ever wants to do a formal down the line. I'll make sure to buy a new mic before we do if he accepts. And I don't know if that's the same Brandon that's backstage or not, or if there's another one somewhere out there. So I don't know what that lore is, but shout out to both of you. Thank you so kindly.
Well, I'm not sure who that's for, because I'd just like to point out that I don't do virtue ethics. I do utilitarianism. So that's a weird comment to make.
He's talking to Flow State. They call him Slow State to make fun of him. Yeah, it was definitely shots fired back and forth to each other. So it's all good.
No, fair call. Sorry, I thought I was in the line of fire there.
Nope, you're well.
I'll jump on the bullet, Flow State. I'll throw myself in front of it. Yeah.
Sarcastic Saint put you in the line of fire, but sincere hypocrite with the Big 10. I find it funny how Marx says which denomination is true, but then presupposes the Western narrative of a papacy, deciding councils, as well as thinking the Bible is an IKEA manual for morality.
Well, yeah. So the problem isn't that, hey, I think that the papacy is true, or I think that Eastern Orthodox is true. What I'm pointing out, that in a society, when they start to put down these denominational ethics and moral systems, all of the others disagree with them. So it's a problem that is to do with the authority that you're giving to people who are the, as I said, normative interpretation of Christianity. What's normative to each to that different Christians is different. So if you start to put down moral designations to your flock, and other people, they just go somewhere else. But if you're actually implementing that in society, then the rest of society are not going to obey that pronouncement. All of the, if you put something down that's Christian, all the Muslims, all the atheists, all the Hindus, all of these people, they won't follow it. So it's not good for society.
That's fair. And then Airborne Animal says with a big 10, disappointed in what appears to be bias moderating by Tomato, allowing Mark to interrupt and drone on, but not allowing Alex to do the same. Shots fired. Number 2, real science does not require any consensus. You're both welcome to respond.
Yeah, I don't know where you got the first one from. Maybe if I'm asked a complex question, I'll be complicated in my answer, but I think there's nuance to things. There's not just yes and no. Things, if someone's just telling you yes or no with every question, you're not learning anything. Science doesn't require consensus, but it does require peer review from experts. That's part of the scientific method that we have. So I don't know what you're talking about.
I think it's because Sara met me in person, so she sized me up already. She thinks she can take me, but she doesn't know about Mark. So
I can take both of you. Piss off.
I believe that. Yeah, absolutely.
And Airborne follows up with another 5. Thank you. I will absolutely share my thoughts, particularly when they are by people that I support, super chats, and that I know can do better. Well, do better. All of us, I guess. And then we already read Brandon's out. And Andy comes in with another 5. Presentism is not moral relativism. It's exactly the opposite. Presentism assumes that our current standards are correct and uses them as a standard. And that was when I kind of pointed out that the two things we were going back and forth on with what would happen then versus what would happen now if somebody harmed your family.
Yeah, I'll just quickly address that, because basically in history, presentism is saying, hey, these people did these horrible things in the past. They may have had practices that culturally we would reject in current morality, but we don't try to judge them for doing it because they didn't have the understanding of the consequences of those actions on their society, on their, the people around them that we do today. So you're basically saying that, hey, something is morally acceptable in a different time, right? It's kind of like saying, hey, my grandfather said something horribly racist, but, he's a product of his time. That's exactly what it is. So any relative change from now to then, it is relativism. You would have to appeal to something else to make it non-relative, that, hey, it's based upon God's word or whatever. Okay, but just saying, hey, it was in the past, so it's okay, is presentism. I'm sorry, it just is.
And I do think that it's kind of weak for if Christians say, well, that was just back then, because kind of what they're saying is, oh, it's immoral, but God allowed it back then, so God allowed something immoral. Which is why I think in order to be consistent, you have to understand that God commanded it. It is moral. But I think, and hopefully people got the point I was trying to make, the better approach is to show the person on the opposite side that the entailment of their worldview ends in some sort of thing that they're condemning on the other side.
Fair enough. And I think Andy, get your butt up here. I know you went on this panel. Dustin with a big 5 says, doesn't Mark support a science that uses animals as test subjects and experiments? You're welcome to respond, Mark.
Yeah, Dustin, it's secular humanism, not secular mammalism. So I prioritize humans, and I acknowledge that that is a subjective thing because I'm human. I'm not a test, a mouse or something. So I will prioritize humans just like I will prioritize my family over, the stranger in the street. I'm sorry, that's sort of how it works. Social interactions work. So I will prioritize a human over an animal. I'm sorry if I rescue your baby before Fluffy, your cat, but that's just what I prioritize.
And so you're not like a vegan or anything, right, Mark?
No, I think that, so there's moral obligations and moral virtues, basically. So I think that it's a moral obligation not to harm anybody, not to assault anybody, all of these things. But it's a moral virtue if you give to charity. Like, it's not expected, but it does make you morally better. And I think veganism would be a moral virtue, but not a moral obligation. I've cut down on my meat a lot just because of what it does to the environment, and it seems to be better off, not doing it. But I still eat meat from time to time, sure.
And so you would say then that in the same way, like, it's okay to own an animal. Like, in the same way that it's okay to eat an animal.
Sure.
And I don't want to drag it back into this, but it is interesting. Do you think you could differentiate what it means to own an animal and a prisoner?
Yeah, one's an animal. I'm a humanist, not a mammalist.
Right, but like in the way that one owns an animal, isn't it similar to the way a prisoner is in a prison system?
No.
Could you tell me why?
Because if I have a gecko, I can sell it or kill it.
Is that the only differentiation? Oh, well, I mean, you couldn't. I don't know about gecko. It gets into vagueness because there's some animals that you would be able to kill and some that you wouldn't.
I don't know. What's her name? Kirsty Gnomes took out a dog and a goat with no repercussions. So
really,
yeah,
I don't know. Is that an Australian thing?
No, that's a US.
Oh, it's America. I don't know.
Yeah. She shot her dog and shot a goat. But
Nice.
like, you wouldn't be able to walk into a prison that you own and shoot some prisoners just for the hell of it.
Gotcha.
Airborne says with another 20, the vast majority of unaliving of the unborn, 98+% were not by grape, and thus were created via consensual sex. So because the mother chose to do it, she does not have the right to unalive the unborn per the humanist's logic.
No, she does, because it's not that you don't have a right to unalive people. It's only in certain circumstances when, say, your bodily autonomy is being violated, you're under threat. Like, so you can defend yourself. That's perfectly fine under secular humanism. There's no problem with that. So if your bodily autonomy is being violated, now what we do is we basically give time for the woman to decide if she consents to having that child or not. And if she accepts responsibility for that child, then she accepts responsibility. But she's got to make that choice whether she does accept that responsibility or whether it is infringing upon her bodily autonomy. That's basically it.
I would actually push back on that. By the mere idea that you say whether she accepts responsibility or not implies there is a duty and a responsibility, right? Like, you're already implying that to say I accept, right, means that there's a reject, right? So I can either reject responsibility or accept responsibility, which implies there is a responsibility, also known as a duty, already attached to that action, right?
Well, it's about consent. It's about whether she consents to have her body used in that way, just like you would consent whether to have somebody, put it as succinctly as possible, penetrate your body, basically, which can be, I've heard some women speak favorably of. That is a matter of consent right there. So if she does not consent to it, then she hasn't taken on responsibility for that.
Consenting to sex, right? But this says that they're saying 98% plus of them were not unconsensual. That means the bulk of the women doing this, it was consensual sex that led to pregnancy. And then you said she can choose to accept responsibility or not, correct?
Correct.
From that point. Right. So that's what I'm saying. what I'm saying is
okay.
she has the duty, right? You're by you simply saying she can accept or reject the responsibility automatically implies there is a duty already. There is a responsibility and an accountability. By rejecting responsibility, is that better for society or not? Like, that's the question that rings in my head. If you say I reject responsibility, therefore I have an AB, right? You're rejecting responsibility of something that you did. You put yourself in that predicament and you are rejecting that responsibility. Therefore, if we all reject responsibility as a whole, let's apply that across the board, right? I accept responsibility or I reject it. If we apply that across the board throughout all society, then wouldn't that inevitably, like, if we all just said, I don't feel like it, reject, then wouldn't that make us worse off if we just applying that logic? Well, it disrupts my bodily autonomy. Don't feel like doing it. Going to work and digging holes or going to work and building houses disrupts my bodily autonomy because I don't feel like doing it, right? It hurts my body. Like, I reject responsibility. Making money because, I have to survive. I reject that responsibility because I don't feel like doing it. Right. So what I'm saying is if you apply that logic across the board and to say, I reject responsibility, well, that's like a shitstorm waiting to happen.
Well, I didn't realize I was doing 2 debates tonight, but sure.
Sorry,
No, that's okay. That's okay. So what we're talking about is rejecting the, there's no duty up front. You're basically like consenting to this or rejecting or basically rejecting your consent. You're basically withholding your consent. Now, people can choose to not go to work and live in poverty and do all of these things. It's not good for them. That their well-being will certainly suffer. Sure, but the question is, would it be a worse society if we forced people to go to work and forced people to dig ditches without their consent? And I would say that would be a horrible world. That would be an awful world where people were stuck doing this thing that they don't want to do.
Right.
So in that case, you have the choice of, well, I can quit my job, I can go on the road, I can, neglect what I see as my responsibilities. Okay, but it's going to be a worse life for you, sure. And it may be a better life for the woman if she does have the baby, but we don't force that upon her, just like we don't force people to dig ditches.
Well, I think, right, we don't have to force people to do anything, right? I agree with you in that aspect, but I think there is some form of shaming, right? Like, if you're the bum on the street and there's no shame in being the bum on the street, well, then, why try to do anything if we can all just be bums? And I think the same would go for AB as well. Like, if there's no shame in just going and getting an AB, right? If there's no shame in doing that, you know what? I don't feel like doing anything. Fuck it. Like, I think that we kind of lost. It's the concept of taking responsibility for your actions, and we're allowing people to negate responsibility. So if there was no consequence to having sex, right, premarital sex, or even being married, right, if there's no consequence, and I don't mean consequence in a negative way, but like a responsibility that comes with that. For instance, the responsibility is, you're accountable for somebody else's body in that moment. If you have an STD, so on and so forth, yada, yada, yada. Or if you get somebody pregnant, if you get pregnant, like, all of these things are things to be accountable for by engaging in that act. And we've negated the responsibility completely, where people don't recognize it as a response. It's just a thing, right? It's just a thing you do for fun. They don't realize that other things can happen afterwards, and you are now responsible for whatever happens after this action. Anyways, I just heard a magic word in there, and it just.
Well, I think that what we're doing is we're really pushing out safe sex so people will not become pregnant, or ideally will not become pregnant. But there still is a risk factor to carrying a baby. And what right do any of us have to say you will risk injury and death for something that you don't consent to when we have medical options available? I don't think I have that right to tell somebody they have to take that risk. And their autonomy, I don't see it as saying, hey, this person has a right to violate you because you know, that you just happen to have. Having sex, consent to sex is not consent to pregnancy. There's no way that that is the
Yes,
case.
it
But
is. You damn
oh,
well
it
know
absolutely
it.
is not.
All right. I will.
Absolutely not.
I'm gonna hold my thoughts, and that way we can let the
Well,
panel
I'll just
ponder.
add, for the last thing I'll add, it's interesting that Christians push the contraceptive that we know is ineffective, rhythm method and all of that stuff, instead of really effective birth control methods, which is, I think it says it all right there.
Well, can I just ask one question for you, the panel? Is it your position that it's an unaliving of a human person, but it's justified?
Well, I would think that, I mean, I'd be really stretching definitions to say that, you know, the cluster of cells that they usually, you know, have an abortion with is a person. I'm not sure I would agree with that, but
Call it
it
20 weeks.
definitely is human cells, sure. It's a human fetus or a human, yeah, it is human, sure.
Well, I was just, because you said person. I'm not holding you to that. It's just in
Well,
your
yeah,
example.
yeah.
I would say that that's consistent, the consistent position. I just think, like, even in the way that we're talking about, like, this person doesn't have the right, like, it is your child you're talking about there. I don't know. I would never speak of my child that way.
Well, I don't, you know, I think that I wouldn't try to tell you how you should feel about your child, Alex. Why should I do that?
I don't know. I just think society would be better off if we didn't hate our children.
Well, I don't think they hate their children. Like, you're sort of playing this down as just either, you know, from Sarah, oh, they're just having fun. And I don't think anybody's, you know, ever gone to do something like that and said, oh, this is just a bunch of fun. I think there is consequences, even though they're not as serious as they could be. There's definitely consequences. And you mentioned yourself shame, which is never useful. But Alex, you sort of say, well, you know, it's just they hate their children. No, that's not necessarily the case. I don't think that follows.
If it is an actual person, and you can disagree with that, and that's a different debate, but if it is an actual person and it's just a justified unaliving of them, then I would say that that is hatred. But if you want to say it's just a clump of cells, then okay, cool, you don't hate this clump of cells. But
is capital punishment hatred
of your own children for no reason other than
no in the prisons?
Womb?
Capital punishment in America, no. Is that
yeah, they deserve it.
Okay, well,
if you're saying your own
isn't
child,
that a
just because you live, you deserve this. I don't know.
Before we get deep, gentlemen, let's hold that thought. Hold that thought, and Mark, I will let you come out of the gate swinging if you want.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's not even my second debate tonight is against Sarah and Alex
on abort on AB.
It's fine.
You hit a spot for me. It's good. I mean, I know it's definitely a great conversation to have, and I think people know where I stand on it very well. And like when I hear little words, I'm like, oh wait, hold on. But we'll get back to this. I promise. Let's go ahead and bring the panel on, and I will get back to more super chats. I'll start reading them throughout the panel. So bear with me. Thank you. We'll hold those. I'll get to them. Here we go. All right. For some reason, it was going slow on my end. Did it come through on everybody? Like the video play through well on everybody else?
It went through just fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes StreamYard does that. It just shows,
like,
you know,
starts delaying on. But I mean, I have like 10,000 tabs. So I see everybody's connecting into. So no problem there. And I do also still have backstage. I've got Brandon, Binks, Howdy. You still need to cam up for me, and Spicoli is waiting as well. So if you want them on here, you guys know what to do. You guys are all familiar with my territory and how we operate. Keep the interruptions to a minimum, keep the spurging to a minimum. I love the entertainment factor, but not if it's the whole freaking panel. Outside of that, I will leave the floor open. Mark, if you did want to continue your thought, I will give you priority if you want to.
I have two quick things, and then I'll shut up for a little while and just kind of observe. So the first thing I wanted to say, Alex, just so you know, because you didn't know who Kristi Noem was, she is the Secretary of Homeland Security. So just you should probably be aware of, especially if you're like a Trump supporter, which I suspect you might be. And she is
I'm
also
not very political.
That's fair enough.
I want to get more into it. I need to.
But I also wanted to push on Sara a little bit, and again, I'm going to shut up after this. But I agree with Mark that consent to sex is not. I would say it is consent to getting pregnant, right? Like the possibility of getting pregnant, but it's not consent to carrying that pregnancy for 9 months, right? And I think the framing of it as just rejecting responsibility, like you're rejecting one responsibility, but like Mark said, like seeking an abortion itself is not like a fun, exciting experience. No one's it's not a joyous time. And it is itself a separate responsibility that people have to go through. And so I think that discernment is important. But I have secular.
What are you taking responsibility for if you have sex then?
Mm-hmm.
Didn't you say that sex was taking responsibility to the possibility of getting pregnant?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so then what are you responsible for? I guess that is the responsibility for an abortion.
Yeah, I mean, you can choose. You're not consenting to staying pregnant for that full 9 months. You're consenting to that possibility, right, of getting pregnant. But we have like medical intervention. So
what does the possibility mean?
It means that you might get pregnant, and then you have to make a decision about whether or not you want to stay pregnant for 9 months.
That would carry moral weight. Wouldn't it carry moral weight?
If I speed on the highway, do I have a possibility of getting pulled over by a cop?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if he does pull me over, do I still have to pay that ticket and deal with whatever the consequences are because that possibility was just a possibility?
Yes, and those legal consequences can change based on like what the laws are of the area. The cop does not have to give you a ticket, right? They can let you off with a warning, or they can, they can say, hey, stop speeding. And if you're speeding all the time, maybe they might be more likely to give you a ticket or not. But again, it's relative to the laws. And what I'm saying is the laws aren't set in stone there. And we have medical
intervention. Drive a car, you might
get
into a wreck too. So do you consent to a car crash every time you get into a car?
No, you never consent to a car crash.
Right.
That's why you've got insurance.
But it's a possibility.
It's still a possibility.
Sure.
That's not true. I've tried to take people out on the road.
Oh God!
Christian morals, ladies and gentlemen. Christian morals, right there. Thanks,
that had nothing to do with Christianity. That had to do with.
They always say that, Dustin, and it always turns out otherwise.
Oh goodness!
I'm just giving Dustin a hard time. There's not a good, like, seriously. I'm just giving Dustin a hard time.
I think just one thing that Ryan said. If you take the position that it's the justified unaliving of your own child, then I can understand why you would say an AB. Sorry, I don't know if I can say these words. Is not a good experience, right? But if you don't take that position and you're just like, it's a clump of cells. Why is it like, all right, I get it. Like if I go to the dentist and get a tooth taken out, it's not a great experience, but it's not that bad.
Well, I guess I would say like the uncertainty, even if you're not sure, even if you're like are undecided on whether or not it's like you might refer to it partially as a clump of cells, you might partially like see it as your child. Like even that alone is going to be an emotional burden that you have to deal with. And I think we should be empathetic to people who are struggling with that choice.
I get that if you're back and forth on the positions and you're not sure. But if you're fully on like people, clump of cells,
the experience itself is not without
most people
risk.
Aren't like without. Most people don't want to have ever children ever, right? They just don't want to have them then. So they're dealing with those mixed emotions of, hey, I want this to happen, and this could be possibly a great thing, but I can't do it now, right? They're just exercising their judgment. Doesn't mean they're nihilistic monsters like that, like people portray them. Like these are genuinely difficult decisions, which is why it's like so horrible to like, call out and protest people who are going to get these things done. In fact, a lot of people who are having to have these procedures don't want to have them. at
Well,
all.
would you-
Like they're being forced to because of the
And a lot of
medical
them
situation
do.
they're in.
What would you say
And a
about
lot
the
of them
person-
brag about it.
Yeah, what would you say about the person who believes it's a
I-
child?
Oh, sure, I believe you. The worst possible case probably does exist.
Yeah,
I've
I
met
would
some
even
horrible
I
people.
would even say there was a girl that I was mildly acquainted with who had her fifth AB, I believe, and
What's her name?
not she's nowhere in this. Like I
Yes,
haven't
remember.
seen her. It's been probably like 10 years.
She's
but
coming on Monday for a
five
debate.
of them had five.
Get her email.
Looks like,
And
is she
I was
single?
just like, you know, at what point do you stop utilizing that as your tool for prevention of having children, right? Like it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Well, we don't use that as the first tool of prevention. We want to have, you know, sort of contraceptives as our first tool of prevention, certainly a last resort. But I mean, I really want to ask the question, what level of acceptable risk? Because don't forget, women still die in childbirth. So what level of acceptable risk is there that you want to force people to, Dustin, people to go through? Like what level of risk?
I'll lay my life down right now.
I'll be agreeable if you know, if there's a potential risk, right? Like she could die, have serious medical issues. I'm totally
Hold on a second.
I totally acknowledge that if that's already upfront and very obvious to, you know, even what is it, ectopics pregnancies, like you have to technically have them removed because you could die from that.
Well, you can die even without that.
I'm agreeable at the idea that you know, if there's some actual medical harm on its face value right there, yes, I think mitigating that scenario and, you know, doing that is beneficial, right? Because it's the life of the mother at that point. However, without that standing, and I put aside all of the exceptions, the medical risks, the if there's grape, you know, things like that, I put those to the side. I think the exceptions are not the rule. The exceptions, yeah, if that it's not reasonable to expect somebody to carry for that. However,
doesn't abortion come with its own set of risks?
Yep.
Yes,
Yeah,
but they're
absolutely.
much less than carrying the child to term. So
But it doesn't matter because Christians get abortions too.
That's true too.
Well,
Yeah, they're going they're going against their religion by doing
Christians
so.
have different beliefs, kind of thing. So I'm not going to lump.
Not a single Christian that is actually a Christian would hold to.
Okay, that's a no
having an abortion.
abortion.
Okay, yeah,
That's not. No, it's not. No, it's not. I can literally give you
no
that.
real Christian.
It's not a new. It's
no
not a
real
new.
Christian would
Hold
pretend
on.
to know who's a real Christian. Judgment is God's alone. Get the fuck out of
Hey,
here.
that's great. That's great. Except for God gave us an entire book and church history to look off of to say who is a Christian and who is not. Right? The scriptures say you shall know them by their fruits.
Yeah, and Christians get.
Hold on. Does the Didache in chapter 2 verse 2 say you shouldn't have an AB?
I really want to go back to this
commit
subject without
infanticide?
having it change.
Oh, but you guys were all fine talking about this. You all were fine.
There's that part in the Old Testament where it gives you a prescription to make bitter water. So
Except it isn't. Except you're interpreting it for yourself, and you think that you have the infallible authority to
bitter water is causes women to miscarry.
And you're not even a Christian, sir.
I'm not a Christian.
It never said miscarry. It never said miscarry. If you're reading the NIV, it's a mistranslation, and it's a modern translation.
You know who's a Christian? You know what the right translations are? You're an arrogant piece of shit, aren't you?
Hold on. If you're saying he can't have an opinion because he's not a Christian, that is a genetic fallacy.
No, that's not what I said. That's not what I said, Mark.
Now, I would like to go back to the original topic because I did want to say to Sarah that there's always a risk for women in pregnancy. It can look totally fine, and there can be hemorrhaging when they actually go to birth the child. And sometimes the doctors cannot save them. So, it's not a matter of, hey, these ones we don't allow through, but women still die because we don't see this coming. So, I think you would have to consent to that risk in order to risk your life, even if it's a small risk. And when
are they
with Alex
consenting
saying,
to the
well,
possibility by laying
hold on
down
a
in the
sec,
first place?
Hold on, Brandon. Seriously, calm down.
When Alex said, well, I would die to save them all, that's very noble, and I appreciate that, Alex, but that is your consent, right? What we would ask is, do I have a right to risk your life when it's not me? That's the question.
No, I would
and
just
to bring it to a real world stuff a little bit more, like one of the problems with current abortion laws is that like this risk, while it's nice to say like, oh well, I support abortion in these cases, but in the real world right now, what we're struggling with is states where these like abortion bans are happening, is that the ambiguity on whether or not the mother's life is like at risk enough is turning into doctors being unsure whether or not they're allowed to treat their patients, whether or not they're allowed to give abortions to women who probably need them, because they're not sure if they can prove it in a court of law that they absolutely needed them. And so women are this is why there's an increased maternal mortality rate because of these laws.
How many women give birth every year?
The deaths are usually around 30 per 100,000 live births. So it's very low, but there is the risk.
How many people die?
Wait, you said 30 out of how many?
100,000, yeah.
That have the that die?
Die, yes.
Okay.
Last I read, it was like 30% have complications, but only 8% of that 30% have life-threatening complications.
Correct. Yeah. And a lot of it is they will have complications, and it will be ongoing. It will be some sort of injury that affects them for their life, either, in some way. But, if we're talking about deaths, it's very, very small number. I will point out, though, that is exceptionally high for a first world nation in the US.
Again, though, we're talking about abortion as if Christian versus secular morality has anything really to do with it, because Christians get abortions, and atheists like myself, or agnostics, whatever, I don't agree with abortion. So this really isn't a one-to-one.
It's about what the ethics teach, Dusty.
Well, I think the concept would be if we stuck through like Christian ethics as a society as a whole, would that therefore be better holistically, and would even things like
Christian
abortion be would abortion even be on the bill, if we were in a complete Christian society?
What are Christian ethics? Is it
right, Dusty? So I understand you just said you don't believe it's a thing, but if you don't believe it's a thing, why are you even up here debating it if it's not a thing?
No, because it's a good question we need to ask ourselves and be able to define terms. So when I'm talking,
I don't think you're a Christian.
When we compare Christian versus secular,
can the two of you, do you guys, you know what? Let's just give them a room. Everybody else, if you'd like to take a bathroom break now.
My bad.
What are Christian ethics?
Yeah. Christian ethics are the ethics taught by the normative authority of the church, as well as Scripture.
The Orthodox Church.
I'm not an Orthodox Christian, so I wouldn't be able to specifically vouch for the Orthodox Church.
There's over.
I have no blessing to teach Orthodox ethics, so I would just be going off a general Christian ethic. So I'd be going from Scripture and early church.
You are an Orthodox. Are you an Orthodox? No.
No, I'm not. I'm not considered Orthodox until I'm baptized. I'm not even catechized.
Ethics.
General Christian ethics would come from Scripture as well as the early church teachings.
So no clothing of different fabrics. No.
Yeah, Dusty, this is like the lowest IQ reply you could possibly give.
Yeah, because you're not giving me anything to work with. You're not going to tell me.
Okay, you understand that the ceremonial and the civil law of the Old Testament was specifically given in like Leviticus and stuff like that, right? Like what you're quoting about different fabrics.
What you
We're fulfilled. I'm telling you what ethics we hold to. We hold to the moral ethics of the Old and New Testament. We hold to the entirety of the New Testament, all the prescriptions given there. Now, the Old Testament, there are ceremonial and civil laws that no longer apply to us because the ceremonial laws were pointing to the new covenant that came and is already fulfilled. It will be fulfilled at the second coming.
So where does it say no?
You're boring me already. Shut up.
Yeah, because this motherfucker won't tell me what he thinks it is. He just keeps referring.
I just gave it to you. I just explained it word for word.
An easy example to point to is the Ten Commandments. You compare the Ten Commandments to the amendments of the American Constitution. So if God is so good, why the fuck didn't he give you First and Second Amendment in the commandments?
Yeah, I don't even think that the First and Second Amendment are absolute. I don't think that rights exist. So that's a great one, Teriak.
So as an American, your religion has successfully got you to disavow the First and Second Amendment, which is what
No, I didn't disavow it. I didn't disavow it. I just said it's not my ultimate arbiter for what is good.
Europeans are like getting taken out, like London's.
It's not my ultimate. Yeah, it's because you allow immigration,
and like Americans
with literally no restriction. That's why.
Like people getting locked up, like praying silently, praying in their heads outside.
Understood. Yeah, I understand that. Yeah. And you know what else? And the Muslims are perfectly okay to blast their prayers on loudspeakers in Britain, right?
If they're not important to have, then why?
I didn't say they're not important to have. They're just not the ultimate arbiter.
Everyone shut up. Everyone shut up. If you don't know how to have an actual conversation and speak and then stop and listen, then I'm just going to tell you to shut the fuck up because it's already getting on my nerves. Chaos Queen with a big 5 says, not going to lie, wine is sounding great. You earned it. Thank you so much, Chaos Queen. Please feel free to send more at this point. Sarcastic Warlock with a big 5 says, Nietzsche was not a nihilist and even wrote a book against it. If you think he's a nihilist, you are unread. Try again, both of you. What a joke. Anybody have a thought to add to that?
Back to the beginning.
I mean, I haven't read a bunch of Nietzsche. It's just everybody's opinion of him, whoever has read him. So maybe I should
call Nietzsche a nihilist when his main quote is "Life is hope."
Fair enough. Sarcastic also follows up with, I hope hell is real just so you two will go there for lying about Nietzsche. You unread garden hoses. All right, fair enough. And Airborne sends a big 10 to say women can reject responsibility for sex. Why cannot men, like the financial equivalent to unalive the unborn? How is this equitable, fair? Why are women held to a lower standard than men? That's a very good question.
Fairness is not a good question because men can't get pregnant, so there's no like already that standard doesn't apply, so it doesn't really make sense as a question. Like there's no obligation for men to grow a child in their belly.
Yeah, I agree with him.
I feel like, I mean, yeah, I know that, you know, physically it can be demanding on a woman's body, right? But it's not like the worst thing. It's not until like your, I don't know, 6th or 7th trimester when it actually starts really becoming problematic and you can't tie your own shoes or shave your legs, right? But it's, I mean,
trimester seemed to be when my ex got bitchy. Like she's getting big enough to like be uncomfortable, but
right. Yeah. Second trimesters. Well, I don't know. I felt like the second trimester, everything kind of like settled down hormonally, but I don't know. I don't think being the only female on this panel who has been pregnant and had 2 children, I feel like I can speak to the experience. I mean, I know we're not all the same, but I had 2 pregnancies and they both went perfectly fine, and it wasn't the worst thing in the world. Yeah, you're uncomfortable a little bit, but I mean, so is working out. Working out, you're very uncomfortable. Getting a herniated disc is uncomfortable. Like, there's all sorts of things out there that are uncomfortable. It doesn't mean I have to take like a complete, like, what would be the word I'm looking for? Like, I don't have to go completely off the charts in order to, I don't know, satisfy.
You don't need to go after a fly with a bazooka?
Yes. Just because there's a little discomfort or like, oh, this is going to hurt, you know, okay, it's 9 months. It's not the worst thing in the world. And
there are lots of people that are annoying that we can't kill because they're annoying.
Exactly.
I mean, you can, but you're
that we're not supposed to kill because they're annoying.
Well, I guess I abort duck from the panel every night.
Which trimester do you think he's in?
He's like
I don't know, Sarah. I, as your attorney, would advise you not to answer that question as it might incriminate you.
And Josh with the big 5 says, since you consent to the possibility of a car crash by driving, should you be denied medical intervention in the event of a crash?
Great question.
It's interesting because it is framed as a medical procedure, and it has this, like, you take the sting off of it, right? Now, if it's merely like removing a wart, then okay, call it a medical procedure. But if the medical procedure unalives a human person, then that's very different. It's not just merely a medical procedure. In that case, euthanasia is just another medical procedure.
Nice.
Well, we don't decide whether or not something's a medical procedure based on how ethical it is. We decide the ethics of the medical procedure.
The death penalty is a medical procedure then in that vein.
Yeah, you're just
it
taking
is.
away, like you're just framing it in a way that doesn't sound as bad to your benefit. Which, like, look, if you want to take the stance that it's a clump of cells, I understand where you're coming from. But if you're going to say there's any justification in unaliving your own child, I think our descendants are going to look back on that just absolutely horrified.
You know, like most people who get abortions are already mothers.
I've heard you say that before.
And I sent you a
and
source.
It surprised me last time. I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm saying that everybody I've ever, and I think I said this before, anecdotally, every woman I've ever talked to about this who's had one, which isn't a ton, but they all regret it. Maybe it's possible that that's why we're having the talk about it. But
well, wouldn't that then, because I think they're also mostly married too, right?
I don't know.
Yeah, so that kind of negates, because Ryan, I believe you made an argument earlier saying that they weren't ready for another child or for a child, whether it's financially this, that, and then they're kind of forcing them into that. And that to me actually would be worse for wear in terms of the argument if they're already married and already had another child. Like, you are fully aware of what stands behind that door. And if you're married and you already have it's really not that much more to have another kid.
Well, I didn't make that argument about like whether or not sorry, real quick, just because Sarah pointed at me there. I don't think I made that argument specifically. The argument I would make is that if someone does not consent to being pregnant for 9 months, we should not force them to. It's pretty simple.
If you grow up in the projects in Chicago, and from very early on you're acquainted with this lifestyle of literally going out and jumping people and shooting people and robbing stuff, it becomes very normalized to you. And you do it without understanding the implications of your actions until you get a 25-year life sentence and you're sitting in a cell thinking about it. I think it's the same way with, you say, you're like, oh, well, mothers do it. I think we're just so numb to it as a society because it's so easy to get done. And, oh, everybody does it. I mean, look, I'd probably say 75% of the women I know have had an abortion.
I think that framing is just really condescending to the women who go through this because they know that they're doing something that's morally complex. They're not stupid. They understand that it's a difficult decision. They're going through it. They understand it far better than you do, it seems. So,
may I have a
because I don't have a womb? How do you know I don't have a womb?
Hold on. Dustin wants to leave, and we still have some more panelists backstage waiting anyways. So, Dustin, if you want to give your final thoughts.
So the idea here is human secular ethics versus Christian ethics. The idea being that the substructure, i.e. humans, are ethical. I think that the idea of any principle being a made thing is only as ethical as the thing that makes it. So I don't believe humans being ethical is a reality, because we have examples of both sides breaching the ethical principles that are set in place by those who would judge others by breaking those principles. So when you ask these kinds of questions, it's kind of redundant. Have a good night, everybody.
Bye, Dustin. All right, and I've got Binks. Oops. And then I've got the real Brandon Mize, and Trippy Cast hanging backstage. Duck is still pending back there per usual. So if you want to see Brandon or Trippy Cast on, you know what to do. Andy, I want to turn the floor over to you, buddy.
I'm sad Mark left.
I know.
I had so many things to say about that.
Especially the present. I knew what you were saying. That's why.
He is wrong about presentism.
Follow that
100% wrong about that. He's just wrong about the definition. But I mean, I guess I don't know. All my points were for him. So.
I mean, well, I'm sure.
But in a way, it is a type of relativism, though, right? Because the present always becomes the past. So in a way, it is a type of relativism.
Well, the idea of presentism is that you're saying the present morals are the right ones. And he was using it.
He changes because you get to a new present, and then that present becomes the past.
But
and
then
it changes,
those
being relative.
people in the present would say our morals are correct. That's presentism, right? So that's the fixed standard that you're applying to all past events. And so the Christian can use that argument because they say that there is a fixed standard. He's saying we couldn't use presentism, but we can use presentism. So his argument was just a bad one. That's all I was pointing out. But I mean, he was just wrong about the definition.
Yeah, moral relativism isn't an adjective you can place on presentism. They're just different ideas.
Any other thoughts?
Also, why does he say that natural emotions of reciprocity and empathy are the moral bedrock? Does anybody know? I wanted to ask him that.
Because it has lots of syllables. That sounds brilliant.
That's what he said in his opener. But empathy
because the bedrock of our emotions are the moral intuitions that we are born with. Morality comes from us,
even evolutionary,
not outside of us.
Even evolutionary psychology is going to admit that empathy can evaporate when you have like a lack of resources, or you're fighting over. I mean, you're fighting over any resources, right? Emotions are going to be.
But it's pretty obvious that we gain the evolutionary advantage by our use of compassion and empathy.
Well, that's not my point. That's not my point. My point. I don't care that they exist. My point is, he is arguing for a moral system that is contingent on evolutionary psychological points. So if our resources disappear, it's totally morally okay to kill others for those resources because our empathy would disappear.
Not necessarily what he said, but that's
the logical consequence.
No different from a religious grounding either.
Well,
how
I
much
think it is different than a religious grounding.
On Sunday matter, is dependent on how hungry you are.
Say that again. I didn't hear you.
How much? I know because you were fucking talking. How much
you started talking over me, dude?
On Sunday matters is relevant to how hungry you are.
Why? I don't even understand your point.
What?
Well, he's saying that like your ability to be empathetic, for instance, if I was poor on the street and had no food to eat, I wouldn't necessarily feel bad about stealing bread from you, right? My level of care.
Yeah, but that's okay. I see what you're saying. But Christians aren't saying empathy is moral bedrock. That's the difference.
I don't think that he was either.
Yes, he did in his opening. He literally said that. Go back and watch it.
And speaking of watching, if you're watching over on the Raging Tomatoes side, the mods will continue dropping the link, but the Gauntlet is now open, and I'm going to shut down the Raging Tomato, and we're going to raid over to the Gauntlet. Same show, different channel. If you want to keep watching, just buckle up, sit down, shut up, and enjoy the raid over. Okay.
Popcorn.
And then Sarcastic Warlock says, Alex, it's established that you talk when you have no idea of what you're talking about, but just repeat what you've heard. How many times have you borne false witness tonight besides that?
Does anybody else on the panel did not know that Nietzsche wasn't a nihilist? And I'm not even going to admit to that.
I did know this, yes.
Yeah.
All right. But I just looked it up. And look, because I said, this is just what I've heard. But just because I was wrong on one thing doesn't mean I'm just bad faith on everything. That's funny. But I'm looking it up and I'm getting the quote now. I don't know. Some dude just